Opening. This is an audiobook recording of The Rockstar and the Hockey Hero, Hockey Romance, written by J.K. Jones and narrated by Jeremy Dubois and Martin Boucher. Please be advised that this is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or deceased, or to real events, is purely coincidental. The rights to this audiobook are protected by copyright law, and any unauthorized reproduction, distribution, or use of this recording is strictly prohibited. Thank you for respecting the hard work of the author. Please like and subscribe if you would like more of this. Chapter 1. Okay, so maybe desperate wasn't the right word for how Liam was feeling. It was more like homicidal desperation. That type of desperation that turned into killing sprees if he didn't catch a break at this point, mostly because he was pretty much at his wit's end. The job market had crawled to an agonizing slow, and this final interview would be his last hope if he wanted to stay in Toronto, a cesspool he'd learned to call home. Liam's smile turned strained as he stared around the questionable warehouse. The walls were covered in yellowish-green stains, and the sole of his right foot was sticking to the floors. Two people dressed in ill-fitted suits peered over his resume, one with a thick potbelly, his suit bursting at the seams while the other was thin and hawkish. "And you're from Saint-Bernard-des-Bois?" the hawkish man asked, but he struggled with the French name. "Oui. Yes," Liam stuttered, trying to remember where he was. Most Torontonians didn't speak French regularly, and the ones who did usually yelled at him. "Do you have any experience working in a factory?" the larger man asked, eyeing him above the rim of his glasses. "Non, my parents owned a farm in Saint-Bernard-des-Bois, and I have extensive experience with the farm animals." "Son," the big man cut in. "I asked if you had any experience in factory work. This may be a chicken farm, but most of the work you'll be doing will be inside a factory. Assembly line, machine operators, sorting and counting, cleaning and sanitizing, that's the type of person that I need." Liam's heart sank. He should have read the application more thoroughly. "Oui, je suis..." He cleared his throat. "I am sorry, I am new here. Factory work I can do, I promise. Whatever you need, I'm your man." He forced a smile. The man frowned. "Do you have any other experience that would be applicable to the job? I see you only have farm work and hockey coach. It also says you graduated from Carleton University with honors." Liam dropped out after one semester, but he wasn't going to tell them that. "Oui, I have studied at Carleton University and came here to pursue a career in becoming a hockey coach. I don't have any factory experience as of yet, but I'm a good worker. I promise you won't be disappointed. I firmly believe that being the sprinkle on someone's cupcake is important, you know? It's the little things that make life sweeter." They stared at him incredulously. The hawkish guy forced a smile. "We'll call you." Liam flinched as the metal door was slammed shut in his face. Well, that certainly could have gone better. He sighed, checking the time, and cursed when he realized he was late for his next job. Liam hopped onto his bike and sped down the streets. As he rounded the corner, Kensington Market hit him like a tidal wave. Street vendors shouted their wares, colourful stalls brimmed with exotic fruits and handmade crafts, and the air buzzed with honking horns and animated chatter, making his stomach backflip in sensory overload. It had only been 6 months since he moved here, and Liam was already choking down the bitter taste of defeat. He missed his home, his farm, his parents. Hell, even the cows were a welcome sight, as opposed to someone retching or urinating 3 feet away from him. The quaint life he'd had in Saint-Bernard-des-Bois had imploded the minute his father, the only pastor of their parish, found out about his sexuality. He shoved those thoughts aside and weaved through the crowded sidewalks. The hum of city life was overwhelming and relentless. The scent of street food, Everything from sizzling sausages to fragrant spices clashed with the acrid smell of exhaust fumes. Liam dodged a group of tourists admiring a street artist's mural and swerved around a dog walker whose furry companion seemed to take an inexplicable interest in his bike. He barely noticed the flickering neon signs of trendy boutiques and eclectic shops as he focused on reaching his destination. Finally, he skidded to a stop in front of a small cafe tucked away in a quieter corner of the market. The cafe was a modest, unassuming place with a faded sign that read, "Vegan Delights." Its charm was overshadowed by a slightly shabby appearance. The large windows were fogged with steam, and the doorbell jingled with a faint, tinny sound as he entered. Inside, the cafe was quaint, but smelled of stale pastries and weak coffee. Liam glanced around, noticing the mismatched furniture and the half-hearted attempts at decoration. The vegan donuts, he knew from experience, tasted faintly of chalk, and the food had a way of turning stale within hours. But it was a place he had come to know well, thanks to his friend's aunt, who let him live upstairs at a discounted rate. In return, he kept the cafe's back end tidy, a task that was often thankless but necessary. "Liam!" a voice called the second and put his knapsack down. "Oui. Ah! I mean, yes." Liam jumped, hurrying to put on his uniform. Mrs. Ashford's frizzy red hair came into view, popping up from behind the counter. Her wardrobe could be described as a bohemian hipster. She wore flowing maxi skirts, layered patterned tops, and vintage leather jackets. Add a wide-brimmed hat, eclectic jewelry, and round sunglasses, and she was the full packet. "So," she said with a tight smile, "how did it go?" "Fine," Liam responded hastily. Her direct gaze reminded him too much of his own mother, and he forced himself to look away. "I'll get to the cleaning immediately, and... yeah. About that." Mrs. Ashford rubbed her head. "I'm sorry to say this, kid, but we're going under. You know how it is. The government is trying to put me out of business. I heard they're moving a Starbucks down the street. It's all piss luck, if you ask me." Liam's stomach sank. For the past few months, hardly any customers have come in, despite Liam standing outside all day with a large sign advertising, "Buy one, get one free," because even our donuts are trying to save the planet and your wallet. "Okay, don't panic. He'd figure something out. There was still time." She squeezed his arm, giving him a sad smile. "So," she drawled, "my son is moving back with his new wife and he needs the room upstairs. I know your situation, kid, but I'm dying to meet my granddaughter. So how about this? I can give you the end of the month to figure yourself out and then you can move out." "The end of the month?" Liam squeaked. "That's in 2 weeks." Mrs. Ashford stared at him. "Yeah, that should be more than enough time. I thought you said you have family in Saint-Bernard-des-Bois." "Who disowned me for being gay?" Liam almost shouted at her, but clamped down on his bottom lip hard. Panic must have flared across his face because she continued to pat his arm lovingly. "Don't worry. A young man like you won't struggle, I promise you," she chuckled. "All right, finish up your cleaning and you can take the night off. I'm doing Scrabble with the girls and you know how Elle likes to cheat. Just be thankful you're not her opponent this time. Last week she tried to play quizzaciously with a double word score." 2 weeks. Jesus. Liam's entire body felt numb as he cleaned, trudging through the brownish water Mrs. Ashford promised she wasn't serving to the customers and the roaches that always seemed to appear no matter how many times Liam sprayed them. He went to wipe down the door and jumped at the red paper pinned there. It read, "Notice of Closure," in bold black letters. Below, it detailed the reasons for the closure. Critical health violations had been found. Liam finished cleaning. Not that it helped much since the place was undoubtedly a dump. He hopped on his bike and rode it to the nearest park, sitting down on the cold bench and eating his stale chicken salad sandwich he'd made that morning. Life in the big city wasn't at all like he thought it would be, and he felt like a fool racing here with dreams to become something bigger. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and Liam sighed when he saw his brother's name flashing on the scene. "Hello?" "Liam," Derek huffed. "Comment as-tu été? Es-tu en sécurité?" "You never pick up your phone. I was calling you all day." "I'm fine," Liam replied, his voice dull. "How's mother and father?" "Très bien," Derek replied. "They miss you. Father says all you have to do is repent, and you can come back. Don't worry. I talked them down, and they'll—" "Repent." Liam forced the word out. "And what have I done wrong, Derek?" Derek went quiet, and Liam knew he wasn't going to get the answer he needed. Derek moved out of their farmhouse the second he'd gotten married. He didn't know the type of hell he endured from his father once his sexuality came to light. Liam knew Derek only kept in touch with him to keep up with appearances in their church study groups and his in-laws. Nobody from Saint-Bernard-des-Bois knew that Pastor Léo de la Lemieux's son was gay. All they thought was that Liam had left for the big city to pursue his dream of becoming a hockey player. "I'm busy, Derek. I'll have to call you later." "Wait," Derek said. "Don't stay there anymore. Come home. Mom misses you. Rex is beside himself with worry. Please, don't do this anymore. We can help you." Well, at least the dog was worried about him. Liam's heart panged at the mention of Rex, the golden retriever who had followed him everywhere on the farm when he was a kid, and Liam's eyes stung at the thought of never seeing him again. "I'm fine, really. Good deeds are like seeds. Plant them and watch happiness sprout." Tears brimmed in his eyes. "Tell them I'm fine, living a fancy life in Toronto with new friends and a new fancy job." "Liam," Derek huffed. "Au revoir." Liam hung up, dropping the phone onto his lap. He sighed, putting his head in his hands and fisting his dark black curls. God, he had no idea what he was going to do. Everything was a mess. He'd come here with the only goal in mind to become a famous hockey player. His semester at Carleton University had been a bust. He was 19 and had no freaking idea what he was doing with his life. But he'd rather die than go back to his parents' house. The thought made his throat constrict. A strange smell filled his nostrils, and Liam frowned. Looking up, he saw an apartment in the distance, with smoke billowing from a window. Holy crap! It was on fire. Liam jumped up from the park bench and raced toward the fire. People were fleeing the apartment building, their faces etched with panic. "Please help! There's a child up there!" Someone cried out. "Where?" Liam shouted, scanning the chaotic scene. "Second floor! Hurry!" Liam didn't hesitate. He dashed towards the inferno, the intense heat radiating against his skin as he pushed through the building's entrance. Inside, the smoke was thick and stifling, making it hard to see. He could barely make out the outline of a child huddled on the floor, their mop of blonde hair barely visible amidst the swirling grey. Liam's heart raced as he maneuvered through the dense smoke, his lungs burning with each breath. He spotted the child, who was curled up in a ball, eyes wide and unseeing. Without a second thought, Liam scooped up the trembling kid and bolted towards the exit. The flames crackled and roared around him, but he kept his focus on getting out. He burst through the building's front door, the cool night air a slap to his cheek. His legs felt like lead as he stumbled onto the street, the child cradled tightly in his arms. Emergency responders rushed forward, taking the child from him and wrapping them in a blanket, while paramedics attended to Liam. The child passed out in his arms. "Is he okay?" The person from earlier rushed over. "Yeah," Liam said, trying to pass him off, but the man just shook his head. I don't know him, but he usually stays in the apartment by himself. You watch over him. I have my own family to attend to, the man said, then looked behind him to his family standing on the curb. Oh! Liam felt dumbstruck carrying this child and wasn't sure what to do. His breath was ragged and sweat-slicked as he watched as the fire trucks arrived, their sirens wailing into the night. Are you okay? One of the firefighters asked, placing a hand on Liam's shoulder. Yeah, Liam managed to say, his voice hoarse. Just had to get him out. Okay, let the EMS take him. You can ride in the back. What? Before Liam could respond, they were ushering him and the kid inside an ambulance, giving him oxygen to breathe that soothed his scorching throat. The ride in the ambulance was bumpy, and Liam realized that he left his bike in the park. Damn, it was probably stolen by now. God, this day really couldn't get any worse. 2 tiny fingers curled around his, and Liam almost jumped. He looked down to see the kid from earlier staring at him, his wide, watery eyes filling with tears. Was this kid going to cry? What do I do? Panic seized him as he struggled to think of something to calm the kid down. But he didn't do anything but stare up at him with big eyes. They stared at each other, and something strange and protective welled in his throat. Why was this child all alone? Where were his parents? Did they neglect him too? Was he alone in the world, just like Liam? Do something. His mind hissed at him, and Liam shot the kid a strained smile. Bonjour, je m'appelle Liam de la Lemieux, he said, then cursed when he realized he'd said the words in French. The kid blinked at him. Je m'appelle Nicolas Dupont. Well then, this day wasn't so bad after all. Chapter 2. When they arrived at the hospital, they immediately rushed the child off to the sick ward and left Liam in the dust. He laid down on one of the cold couches, his stomach in knots as he waited for news about Nicholas. He was the only one in the waiting room, and soon his eyes were drooping closed, and he was being dragged under into sleep. Liam awoke to a soft nudge to his shoulder. Blearily, he opened his eyes to see a doctor in blue scrubs staring down at him. Sir, did you bring that child in from the fire? Oui, Liam said, rubbing his eyes. How is he? Is he okay? We'll need to keep him overnight. Did you bring any of his healthcare information? We aren't able to find him in the system. No, Liam replied, feeling a sweat break out all over his forehead. I am not his family. I just found him in the apartment alone, and I got him out. The doctor's mouth thinned into a hard line. His brow wrinkled. He had light grays covering his temple, and his skin was a deep bronze. I see, he replied. Would you mind speaking with social services for a moment? I think that would be best so we can get a better idea of where this kid came from. The sudden commotion at the front of the emergency room drew Liam's attention. His gaze locked onto the scene as a crowd pushed through the entrance, flashes from paparazzi cameras bouncing off the walls. Hospital security and bodyguards held the chaos at bay as the entourage moved forward, making a beeline straight towards him. Leading the group was a woman in a pristine white jumpsuit, her Jimmy Choo heels clicking sharply against the linoleum. Trailing just behind her was a man in a business casual suit, speaking rapidly to another man. A man who made Liam's breath catch in his throat. The man wore a bright pink fishnet shirt that barely reached his midriff, revealing pale, toned abs and a taut waist that dipped into a sharp V, disappearing into a pair of skin-tight leather jeans. His black Doc Martens gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and his long, tousled blonde hair cascaded over his shoulders, which left Liam utterly mesmerized. The doctor's jaw dropped. He blinked several times as if his eyes were deceiving him. The woman darted over to them. Hi there, I'm Meredith Lawson. You can call me Mary. I'm here to inquire about Nicolas Dupont. His father is here to pick him up." That's his father," the doctor sputtered, then seemed to remember himself. "Right. Sure. I'm Dr. Mohammed Ahmed. A pleasure to meet you." She gave him a brittle smile and stared at him expectantly while the others made their way over. Liam slowly rose, feeling shabby next to these well-dressed people. The man in the pink fishnet shirt gave the doctor a bored expression and didn't even bother to shake his hand or introduce himself while the doctor openly gawked at him. "Right." The doctor cleared his throat. "Nicolas Dupont, do you happen to have his ID, and then we can get started?" Mary handed him all the information he needed, and the doctor nodded, but his hands shook slightly. "Thank you, okay. I'll get right to the chase. His airways are inflamed and he's struggling to breathe. He needs oxygen and some help from a ventilator to keep things under control. Recovery won't be quick. He'll need breathing treatments, meds to calm down the inflammation, and maybe even a procedure to clear out his lungs. It's going to take a few weeks in the hospital and a good few months to get back to normal." "Sir, we have to be on the bus in 45 minutes. The next tour starts within a few days," the well-dressed man uttered, clearly having no regard for the child's well-being. The blonde-haired man's mouth twisted into a sneer. "Sortez-le de l'hôpital maintenant." Liam's heart jumped and he whipped his head to glare at the man. What was he thinking? How could he want to discharge his child so quickly? Nicholas had been in that apartment all by himself. The thought of the kid being dragged out of here made his anger flared. "His lungs are damaged. How can you even say that?" Liam blurted out, causing everyone to stare at him. The blonde gave him a cool once-over. "Excusez-moi, who are you?" "Ah, this is Liam de la Lemieux," Mary said, speaking quickly. "He was the one I told you about who saved Nicky from the fire." "That's right." Liam cut her off, staring deep into the blonde's grey eyes. "I saved him while he was all alone in his apartment. He's not well enough to be discharged just yet. He needs a good night's rest and a safe place to sleep." "And who are you to decide such things?" the man gritted out. "Pourquoi ce petit avorton de mi répond-il?" Anger flared inside Liam's chest. "Well, this little runt saved your son's life." He was shaking as he stepped toward the man and realized he was a head shorter than him, but didn't care. This guy was a jackass. First to leave his son unattended, and then to take him out of the hospital when he wasn't even well enough to walk so that he could finish up his tour. He needs rest. The blonde gave him a startled look as if nobody in their life ever dared to speak to him like that, but Liam didn't care. He wasn't fit to be Nicholas's father, clearly, and if the kid wasn't provided sufficient rest, then Liam was prepared to speak to social services about his inadequate care. "I wasn't aware that hospitals permit strangers to interfere with their children's care, or that they willingly engage in breaches of confidentiality." The blonde sneered, giving the doctor a pointed look. The doctor cleared his throat and nodded. "Let's move this to Nicholas's room, and we can discuss it more in detail there." Liam opened his mouth but closed it as they walked past him. His hand balled into a fist, and he gritted his teeth. There wasn't much he could do, considering he wasn't Nicholas's father. He'd just have to wait and see what happened to the kid. Liam sat on the couch, fisting his dirty jeans until his knuckles bleached, staring at the glass wall the doctors and the entourage disappeared into. A few minutes later, the sliding doors opened, and the blonde man was striding out of the hospital with Nicholas in his arms, a white blanket thrown over his back, and a teddy bear tucked into his arms. Liam's breath caught, but just as he stood, a wall of bodyguards came out of nowhere, fighting off the horde of paparazzi, and then Nicholas was gone, disappearing into the night. "Liam, right?" a voice said, causing Liam to jump. Mary stared up at him, her brown wavy hair reaching down to her waist. "Here." She held out a white card and he took it. Theo Dupont wishes to thank you for your bravery. We'll be in touch. Liam scoffed, and the second she walked away, he crumpled the business card and tossed it into the trash. Why did he need to be thanked by the pompous ass anyway? The guy could barely take care of his child, and someone like that Liam would never want to know. He left the hospital in the wee hours of the morning, his body slumped with exhaustion. The second he got home, he went straight to sleep. Liam woke up feeling surprisingly refreshed. He stretched and shook off the lingering grogginess before heading out to the park. He felt a small thrill of relief seeing his bike where he'd left it. It was a small victory, but in his world, every little win mattered. At least some homeless person wasn't using it as a pillow. Pedaling through the crisp morning air, he let his mind wander. The local coffee shop was bustling with its usual crowd, and he eagerly grabbed a warm croissant and a steaming cup of coffee. Finding a quiet corner, he pulled out the newspaper, flipping through the pages with a hopeful glance. He scanned the classifieds, his eyes landing on an ad for an assistant coach position with a Little League hockey team in the Upper East End of Toronto. It wasn't his ideal job. He'd much rather be out on the ice playing than coaching. But it was a step in the right direction, and if he got the job, he could finally start looking for a new apartment. As he prepared to pay for the newspaper, something caught his eye on the front page. His breath caught in his throat as he saw his own face plastered across the cover with images of him rescuing Nicholas from the burning building. The headline blared, "Local hero rescues turbulent singer Theo Dupont's son from certain death." Liam's heart pounded. What the heck was this? He felt a wave of panic and disbelief roiled through him. Why were his actions being splashed across the news? He fumbled with the newspaper, trying to steady his hands as he quickly began reading the article. Theo Dupont, the lead singer of the international sensation Broken Sun, known as Soleil Brisé in France, has taken the world by storm with their hit albums It Wasn't Me and It Was Me. A 6-time Grammy winner and recent primetime Emmy recipient for his chilling role in Creature of the Night, Theo's star power is undeniable. Rumour has it he's lined up for high-profile movies with Brad Pitt and Sandra Bullock, both set to shoot right here in Toronto. But it's not all glitz and glamour for Theo. His rocky relationship with his son is well known, especially since the tragic death of his son's mother. Recently, the nanny who was meant to be caring for his child was killed in a fire, leaving the boy's fate hanging in the balance. Thankfully, a local student on a bike came to the rescue, saving Theo's son from certain disasters. From Rockstar to real-life hero, Theo's life seems as dramatic as his performances. Liam thought he was going to hurl. A 6-time Grammy winner? And Liam spoke to him like, "Oh mon Dieu." Liam groaned and shook his head, his face burning in humiliation. No wonder the doctor looked so damn starstruck. But the guy was a prick. I mean, who took their son out of the hospital just hours after being in a fire? His stomach knotted, thinking about the nanny who had died. Jesus, he had only been focused on the kid and didn't see anyone else in there. Liam sighed and put the newspaper back. He paid for the classified listings and hurried on his way. Liam managed to snag an interview for the assistant hockey coach position with the Little League team. He threw on a blazer he'd found at Value Village and a pair of loafers he'd scavenged from the back of Mrs. Ashford's closet, likely the last remnants of her son's fashion choices. He didn't bother styling his unruly black hair, letting it do whatever it wanted. He sprinted through the Upper East End of Toronto, where the buildings seemed to stretch into the clouds, cursing himself for not planning better. By the time he reached the corporate office, he was sweating like a sauna. The place was massive, with towering walls and window-reflective panels. He gulped when his cheap shoes slipped on the tile floors as he tried to find his way to the North Tower where the interviews were happening. He took the elevator up to the 15th floor, trying to steel himself for the interview. Mon Dieu, he was going to be late. He desperately needed this job because if he didn't, he'd be screwed, and he couldn't get evicted from his house. He was thinking a mile a minute. Once the elevator doors opened, he leaped out only to collide headfirst into a solid wall of muscle. Liam yelped. Suddenly strong arms enclosed his waist, and the air was punched out of his lungs as he was slammed against the wall. "Stay where you are! Don't move!" The bodyguards shouted him. Liam's vision fractures before piercing grey eyes strove into view. Theo Dupont was staring down at him. They were so close he could see the flare of his grey iris and the blonde stubble covering the man's cupid bow lips. Holy crap! Liam startled, wrenching himself out of the man's grasp. His heart wanted to climb into his throat. Theo Dupont was standing there with an army of bodyguards ready to tackle him to the ground. Liam took a shuddering breath, forcing himself back. "I'm sorry. Je suis désolé. Désolé." Liam started babbling, his face burning hotter and hotter by the minute. Theo regarded him, then waved his hand so his bodyguards would stand down. They stood facing each other in the hallway, and Liam realized that he'd fallen into Theo so hard that he'd slammed into the wall across from the elevator. Mon Dieu, just kill him now. I need to go, Liam sputtered. He moved to walk past Theo, but noticed Theo did the same. They stared at each other, and Liam thought he'd die from all the blood rushing to his face. "Where are you going?" Theo demanded through gritted teeth. Liam choked on the knot forming in his throat and pointed in the direction down the hall, where there were a few people lined up to be interviewed. "After you," Theo muttered. Liam straightened his spine, trying to walk with his head up, as he headed to the lineup where the other interviews were waiting. Theo walked past them, and everyone started gasping and whispering to themselves. "Pretty cool, right?" a man said next to him. Liam jumped and quickly nodded. It's been 5 years since he's hosted the Little Leagues in Toronto. It's a charity event only held once a year for the kids while Broken Son performs in the background. I heard this year his son is old enough to join the Little Leagues hockey team. Broken Son on Ice it's called, the man continued. I'm Eric, by the way. Eric Lance. Liam de la Lemieux, he said, still slightly breathless. You French? Eric asked, and Liam finally turned to look at him. The man was probably a few years older than him, with dirty blonde hair and a thick beard. He looked friendly enough. I'm from Quebec, Saint-Bernard-des-Bois to be exact, Liam replied. Oh, never heard of it. Then again, I'm not French. Eric laughed. How'd you hear about the position? The classifieds, but I don't think I'll get it, Liam said. I have no experience teaching hockey. I played a lot as a kid and growing up. I wanted to play professionally, but no experience teaching. Oh, really? I'm just doing this part-time. I heard they have connections to get you signed with the NFL here, and this is the best way to get my foot in the door too, considering I also would like to go pro. Liam's eyes lit up. Really? I thought I was the only one. I moved here from Saint-Bernard-des-Bois, and I didn't know anyone or anything. It's good to meet someone like me. He beamed. Eric laughed, his eyes crinkling. True, man. Do you want my number? In case we both don't get it, at least I would have made a new friend. They exchanged numbers and Liam blushed when he took out his cracked phone. It dropped while he was riding his bike, and he never had the money to fix it. They continued to talk quietly to each other as the line started moving up, and soon it was Liam's turn. His heart was hammering when they led him inside a conference room with almost 5 people sitting behind the table. Theo and Mary were one of them. Theo was wearing a crisp black military blazer, his chest completely bare with several silver necklaces dangling from his neck, and his blonde hair was tousled with effortless waves. Mary looked dressed to kill with a black-white striped blazer, her hair pulled into a tight bun and her lips blood red. Liam gulped. Have a seat, Mr. Lemieux, Mary said with a smile. So, we meet again. She gestured to the people around the table. Allow me to introduce everyone. This is the board of directors. Jonathan Hale, our financial guru, Claire Dubois, our marketing expert, and Victor Riley, our event coordinator. And of course, Danny Minot, our PR representative. We're organizing a special event called Broken Sun on Ice. We need assistant coaches to train the charity hockey team's little leagues who will perform with the band in a major show sometime in December. This will be a full-time, on-site position, she added. You'll need to relocate to the residence with the other coaches, choreographers, and dancers. The salary for this role is $80,000 per year, plus room and board. After the performance, you'll stay on to continue teaching the kids hockey. One of the children will be Nicholas Dupont, Theo's son, so it's essential we choose the right person for this role. Any questions? $80,000. Liam almost fainted on the spot. That was 4 times his current income. No, Liam hastily replied, his palms getting sweaty. Okay, let's get started. Why do you want to work here? Liam stammered through his answers, his tongue feeling like a boulder in his mouth. He got nervous speaking in English and tripped over his words, sometimes slipping into French, but luckily nobody said anything about it. The fact that you speak French is an asset, Mary said. Nicholas can be difficult, sometimes only choosing to speak French when he's in a mood. She laughed, but Liam noticed that Theo's jaw tightened. Anyway, it was a pleasure to meet you. We'll be in touch. Liam nodded to them and quickly slipped out of the room. The hall was empty when he began walking out, but footsteps behind him made him freeze. He looked back to see Theo standing there, leaning against the door jamb, his gaze on Liam as if he were trying to figure out a complex puzzle piece. Liam's face heated, and he raced out of the door. Chapter 3. Liam muttered under his breath as he scrubbed the bathroom floor. 20 years' worth of grime covered every surface of this place, but Mrs. Ashford insisted that he clean it even though the shop was closing soon. Liam did it anyway to keep himself busy and not obsessively look at his phone or check his email for any job notifications. So far, a week has passed, and it's been nothing but crickets. Liam sighed, his black hair falling into his eyes, and he knew he was overdue for a cut. He had 7 more days, and then he knew Mrs. Ashford would ask him to move out officially. She'd been subtle as a wrecking ball, leaving hints here and there for apartment listings that were so far out of his budget they were in a different stratosphere. Liam figured if he made her happy, maybe she'd let him stay for another week or so. Sweat was dripping down his forehead, and the more he scrubbed, the more his mood seemed to sour. Why were things always so difficult for him? Why couldn't he just play hockey like he came here to do? Liam! Mrs. Ashford called from downstairs. Yeah, Liam replied. You have a visitor. Huh? Liam frowned, slowly getting to his feet. A visitor? He barely had any friends here except for Eric, who he met a few days ago, but he never told Eric where he lived. He wiped his dirty hands on a towel and smoothed out his baby blue wrinkled button-up. His Levi jeans were slightly baggy, and his Converses were filthy. Mon Dieu. Liam sighed and then headed downstairs. Mrs. Ashford was waiting for him at the entrance where Mary stood, dressed to the nines as usual in a fuchsia pencil skirt dress and matching top, paired with a wide-brimmed hat that reminded Liam of Audrey Hepburn in My Fair Lady. What was she doing here? And how did she know where he lived? Liam gulped, smiling at her nervously. Yes? Mr. Dupont would like to speak with you, Mary said, wrinkling her nose slightly. It's about the job opportunity. Liam's jaw almost dropped. He didn't think Mr. Dupont would come personally to speak to him, but then again, he had no clue how these things went. Okay. Liam's voice cracked, and he followed Mary out of the door while Mrs. Ashford shot him a quick thumbs up. A sleek black limo was sitting outside, and one of the bodyguards opened the door for him. Liam wiped his sweaty palms on his jeans and hurried into the vehicle. Theo was sitting at the far end of the limo, his legs crossed and his black slacks riding up to expose his pale ankles. He was shirtless once again, dressed in a dark purplish blazer which was adorned with a silver crown brooch pin dangling near his breast pocket. His hair was still in its wavy curls, tumbling down the sides. The scent of Theo's cologne hit Liam like a wave of cool ocean air with the smoky warmth of sandalwood. Liam felt dizzy, and he forced himself to focus and maintain eye contact. Theo gave him a cool, almost dismissive once-over, no doubt judging his dirty clothes and whether or not it would seep into the leather. "Monsieur de la Lemieux," Theo spoke. And the way Liam's name rolled off his tongue sent a shiver down his spine. "Oui. I mean yes," Liam stammered, mentally kicking himself. He was determined to stick to English with this man because if he didn't, he might accidentally proposition him. And wouldn't that be a fun way to ruin a job interview? Theo's eyes flickered down to his lips and then looked away. "I am here to offer my sincere thanks for saving Nicky. Without you, he would have perished in the fire, so thank you." Liam could tell it caused him physical pain to thank him, judging by how tense he looked. "Oh, no problem. Nicky, Nicholas was wonderful. I'm glad I could help in any way." "Mm-hmm," Theo hummed. "Anyway, I have come to personally offer you a job as the assistant hockey coach on our little league team." "Really?" Liam burst out, startling them both. "Are you sure you don't want someone with a little more experience or someone more suited to—" "No." Theo cleared his throat. "Nicky is quite taken with you. He insists on having no one else. And while he recovers, you will get yourself situated at the apartment complex with the others." Long, slender fingers reached into a briefcase and pulled out a beige folder, handing it over to Liam. "Read this and sign it. We expect you to be at the apartment early Monday morning. Once you're settled, you are to come and find me immediately." Liam nodded hastily, way too excited to listen to what he was saying. "I won't disappoint you. I promise. I'll be the best coach that ever existed." "Mm-hmm." Theo's face slipped back into a bored expression. "Any questions?" Liam shook his head, and Theo dismissed him with a wave of his hand. He thanked Theo profusely while he stumbled out of the limo, his face and neck hot with how hard he was blushing. Mary offered him a tight smile and slipped inside the car, and Liam watched it pull away from the curb, his pulse hammered like it was trying to break free. Liam stepped out of the taxi and stared up at the towering apartment complex that was going to be his home for the foreseeable future. The building was a behemoth of glass and steel, the kind of place he'd only ever seen in glossy magazines or in movies where the main character was way more put together than he felt at that moment. "Mr. de la Lemieux?" "Oui." Liam beamed, racing over to Mary, who stood at the entrance, her hands clasped together. She wore a black off-the-shoulder pencil skirt dress that showed off her curves. Liam noticed there was a small group surrounding her waiting for him. "Come with me," Mary commanded, her Louboutins clicking sharply on the polished marble floors as they echoed through the grand lobby. She led the small group with the precision of a drill sergeant. "Downstairs, you'll find the built-in hockey arena for the kids. It's state-of-the-art, naturally. Over here," she gestured smoothly, "is the full-scale gym. You'll want to make use of it. No excuses. And, of course, there's a swimming pool. Because why not?" She turned back to the group, eyebrows raised. "Any questions?" It was like a luxury hotel that had accidentally swallowed a sports complex. Liam could hardly believe this was his life now. He was half expecting someone to pop out and tell him there'd been a mistake, that he was supposed to be in some rundown apartment with a leaky ceiling, a poor imitation of Bates Motel, and not here, in what looked to be the Hilton. "Once you start practicing for the show," Mary continued saying when nobody else spoke, "you'll need to coordinate with the band and the choreographers. It'll be a demanding schedule, so make sure you're ready for it." Liam nodded along, though he was pretty sure his brain had short-circuited somewhere between built-in hockey arena and choreographers. The whole place was so surreal that by the time they finished the tour, he was breathless, partly from trying to keep up with Mary's pace and partly from sheer disbelief. Finally, Mary guided them into a room where refreshments were being served. The smell of fresh coffee and pastries filled the air, and Liam's stomach growled in response. He scanned the room, taking in the eclectic mix of people, dancers stretching out in one corner, businessmen talking animatedly in another. And then he spotted Eric standing off to the side, nursing a cup of coffee and looking just as out of place as Liam felt. Liam's face split into a wide grin, and without thinking, he raced over to Eric, practically throwing himself into the guy's arms. "Eric!" he exclaimed. "You made it!" Eric chuckled, though he looked slightly winded from Liam's enthusiastic embrace. "Of course I made it. Someone had to keep you from getting lost in this place," he teased, patting Liam on the back. "I've been texting you non-stop. Figured you'd end up in the swimming pool by accident or something. Did Mary give you the tour here?" "Oui." Liam pulled back, still grinning like an idiot. "Honestly, at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if I did. This place is insane. Did you see the hockey arena? I'm pretty sure this is where superheroes train in their downtime." Eric laughed. "Yeah, it's a bit over the top, isn't it? But hey, at least we're not stuck in some sketchy basement somewhere." "True," Liam agreed, glancing around again. "I just can't believe this is really happening. I feel like I'm going to wake up any second now, and I'll be back in that dingy old apartment, staring at the ceiling and wondering what went wrong." "Trust me," Eric said, raising his coffee cup in a mock toast. "This is as real as it gets. And if you start to doubt it, just remember that Mary's heels can probably pierce through steel, so there's no waking up from this dream." "Good point. I'll keep that in mind. What's your room number?" 109, Eric replied easily. "Yours should be the same since all the assistant coaches will be rooming together." "Do you know who the coach is?" Liam asked. "No," Eric said, straining to look around the room. "But I'm sure we'll meet him sometime. I want to head to the rink and see how big it is. I heard we aren't just training Mr. Dupont's son, but also a few other high-profile children from affluent families." Eric beamed. "You're kidding." Mon Dieu. Liam could barely keep up with how this job kept getting better and better. "Who?" "Oh, you know, just the usual crowd, like the McAllisters, their sons on the team. And then there's the Bouchard twins, heirs to that luxury hotel chain. And let's not forget little Ryan Devereux. His parents own half of the downtown core." Liam's eyes widened with each name. "You're serious? Those kids?" "Dead serious," Eric replied, chuckling at Liam's reaction. "You'll be coaching the creme de la creme, my friend. No pressure or anything." The room went quiet as Theo Dupont walked in, with Mary right behind him. Theo's neon orange sweater caught everyone's attention. It was bright red-orange, with feathered fringe hanging from the long sleeves. The sweater had a ribbed collar and hem, and the shoulders were loose, giving it a relaxed look. It was cropped short, showing off his smooth, toned stomach and well-defined abs. He wore black slacks and loafers that left his pale ankles exposed. Seriously, how many crop tops did this guy own? Liam couldn't help but wonder, though he noticed his mouth watering a little. Theo looked bored, as usual, but the second their eyes met, he changed direction and headed straight for Liam. Liam's throat went dry and his stomach did a nervous flip. "Monsieur de la Lemieux," Theo spoke, his velvety voice like a soft caress. Is everything to your liking? Liam's scalp erupted into tingles, and he nodded hastily. Everyone was staring at them, and Mary had a slightly impatient look on her face. Come speak to me later, Theo said, his words almost a purr, before turning and walking away with Mary close behind him. A podium stood at the front of the room, and Theo took the stage as the lights dimmed. Liam could just make out a hint of glitter around Theo's eyes. Bonjour and welcome, Theo began, his voice smooth and confident. Thank you all for joining us for our annual Christmas Broken Sun on Ice charity concert. This year, we're excited to integrate our young hockey players into the show. They'll be coached by our team and have the chance to shine alongside us. We appreciate your support and look forward to a spectacular end to the year. Merci beaucoup et à bientôt. The room erupted into applause and cameras flashed everywhere. Dude, Eric said, yanking on Liam's arm. You know Mr. Dupont? Not really, Liam shrugged. I saved his son's life during a fire. That was you. Eric's eyes widened. No kidding. I heard about that. It was all over the news. So cool, man. Liam laughed, shaking his head. It was nothing, especially since the nanny didn't make it. Yeah, right. Eric sighed. Anyway, be careful of Mr. Dupont, though. Huh? Liam asked. Why? He sort of has a reputation. Eric winked. If you know what I mean. I read the tabloids, and man, this guy has a huge track record of humping and dumping, if you catch my drift. Oh, Liam flushed. I'm a nobody. I'm sure he's got his sights set higher. Eric shrugged, and then Mary was calling him over to meet with Mr. Dupont in a separate room off to the side. Eric lifted his coffee in a mock toast, and Liam chewed on his bottom lip as he was led into another room near the backstage where Mr. Dupont had exited from earlier. Theo was staring out the skyscraper window. The muscles in his back were taut and firm, and his slacks did nothing to hide the firm swell of his arse. Mon Dieu, he was a vision. Liam shoved his sweaty hands into his pocket and cleared his throat. Come here. Theo's deep voice rumbled in the vacant room, and Liam hurried over to his side. What do you see, Monsieur de la Lemieux? Liam turned to look at the skyscraper window, the vast expanse of buildings and street corners. Toronto was a beautiful city, but for some reason, Liam knew that wasn't what Theo was talking about. I see hope, dreams, a future with limitless possibilities, an endless horizon, a forever sunset. Liam smiled, feeling almost foolish. Ah, illusions are always the sweetest, Theo commented dryly. Liam shook his head. Optimism is like butter. Spread it everywhere and life just tastes better. Theo snorted, turning to face him. Tomorrow, Nicky will be joining the class. He can be difficult. I trust you will treat him well. Liam nodded, just as the door creaked open and Mary poked her head inside. Theo sighed heavily and muttered, Le temps passe au-dessus de nous, mais laisse son ombre derrière. Time flies over us, but leaves its shadow behind. Liam frowned and, before he could stop himself, said, Every moment is a fresh beginning. Theo kinked a brow. T.S. Eliot. I didn't know you were a fan of the classics. Liam shrugged, feeling hot all over. My mother used to say I wasn't born with a negative bone in my body. I don't know how true that is now. But yeah, just food for thought. Theo chuckled, and his entire face lit up when he did. Bonne journée, Monsieur de la Lemieux. He patted Liam's shoulder and exited the room with Mary right behind him. Releasing a harsh breath, Liam almost collapsed against the wall. Damn! What was with this guy? And why did he make Liam's knees want to buckle every time he spoke? A strange giddiness welled up inside him, and he forced himself not to get obsessive thoughts. Theo Dupont was devastatingly attractive, and Liam barely knew anything about him. He was so famous that he could have almost anyone in the world, and Liam had no clue as to why he would spend his time talking to someone as low as Liam. Sure, he read all the classics in English and in French, but he still had no formal education. He was the very definition of a country bumpkin, trying to make his way in the big city, trying to carve out a piece of the pie for himself. He thought about Eric's warning and decided to dismiss it. In reality, he knew nothing about Theo, and he was here to work hard. Liam wasn't too keen to get involved with his boss in any other way other than being strictly professional, and so far Theo hasn't done or said anything to make him think otherwise. No, it was all wishful thinking. Liam gave the skyline one last look and headed back out to where the others were waiting. Chapter 4. Holy crap, Liam muttered as he walked in. The apartment was way too fancy for someone like him. The walls were so white they practically glowed, and the kitchen had shiny granite countertops that looked like they belonged in a cooking show. The appliances were all sleek and stainless steel. Huge windows covered one whole wall, showing off the CN Tower like it was a neighbor. The place looked like a giant glass box, and Liam was pretty sure if he touched anything, it would either break or cost him a year's rent. "Damn right!" Eric hooted, pumping his fist right behind him. They dumped their duffel bags near the foyer and went about exploring. Liam stepped into his bedroom and almost laughed. The bed was enormous, with crisp white sheets that looked too perfect to sleep in. A fluffy rug covered the hardwood floor, and there was a sleek black dresser against the wall. He heard Eric's startled laughter from the next room and knew he'd seen what Liam had. God, was this really his life now? Liam didn't believe it. He brought his stuff inside the room, but as he was about to get settled, the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," Liam hollered and raced toward the door. For a split second, he wondered if Theo was coming to see how he'd settled in, but he banished the thought as quickly as it came. Theo had 1,000,001 things to do. There was no way he'd waste his time visiting an assistant hockey coach. Still, his heart kicked up a notch when he opened the door. A man in his late 40s was leaning against the door jamb with a large grin on his face. "Hiya," he boomed. "I'm Coach Volt for the Little League hockey team. A pleasure to meet you." He stuck out his hand and shook Liam's vigorously and then invited himself in. "Nice place, isn't it?" "Ah, oui," Liam laughed. "Yeah. Mon Dieu. This place is amazing." "You speak French," Coach Volt said, stopping in the foyer. He shoved his hands deep into his beige slacks. "Good, because I can't understand a lick of it. I never liked it in school, but kudos to you. Where's the other coach?" "Oh, I'll call him. Eric." Liam called. Eric came pounding out of his bedroom, still beaming. "They have a freaking hot tub on the balcony. I'd pinch myself, but I think I'm better off punching myself to make sure this is real, man." Coach Volt laughed and introduced himself to Eric. "So, how long have you been teaching hockey?" "A few years. I worked for a school at one point, then moved to a community center. But I've got a master's degree in physical education. I might be looking to join the NHL if I can get my foot in the door somehow." "Oh, yeah?" Coach Volt kinked a brow. "I may know someone, but you'll have to come for the tryouts and I can't make any promises. These guys are picky. They aren't just snatching kids up from high school or college these days. You have to be serious about playing and being on the road full time." "Trust me, man, I'm serious," Eric beamed. Him too, but one thing at a time. "I'd love to see how this job works out so far. How long have you been here? What's it like working for Theo Dupont anyway?" "Oh, him?" It's pretty good. The benefits are amazing. Trust me, you'll enjoy yourself. The dancers and bandmates can be a bit much sometimes, but this only happens once a year, so I just put up with it. Young guys like you will have more fun. Trust me. Coach Volt wiggled his brow. We can talk more about it later on. I'll let you guys get settled in, and if you need me, I'm right next door. We shook his hand again, and he left. Eric and Liam stared at each other, then burst out laughing. Coach Volt was too cool. Mon Dieu, this place was amazing. Liam went to his bedroom and unpacked his meager belongings and then headed to the kitchen, only to realize they had no food and they would have to go shopping for it. The sun had already set, and Liam was too tired from the day's events to go shopping. So he dialed out for a pizza and asked Eric what he wanted on it. They ate pizza at the Marble Island, which felt like eating on a fancy kitchen countertop from a magazine. So get this, Eric said between bites of his slice. Last winter, I decided to try snowboarding. Thought I'd be all cool, like those guys in the Olympics, right? Instead, I crash headfirst into this girl, like full-on wipeout. Snow everywhere, my dignity completely gone. Liam snorted. Sounds romantic. Did she sue you? Nah, she actually laughed and gave me her number. Eric grinned. Apparently, she likes guys who faceplant into her life. Well, I guess some people like their men flat on their faces. Trust me, she was definitely on my face by the end of the night if you catch my drift, Eric winked. Now she's my fiancée. Really? Liam's eyes widened. You're engaged? Yeah. Eric laughed. A few weeks ago, actually, I finally found someone who would put up with me. Yeah, know what I mean? For life, that is. Is she okay with you living here and away from her? Yeah, bro, this job is way too good to pass up on, Eric said, chewing. I'll work here for a year, save for a wedding, and then go ham. After that, who knows? If anything, she can move in here with me. I don't think Mary would have a problem with it. What about you? Do you have anyone special? Liam gulped, staring down at his food. Since he lived in the city, there were very few people he'd come out to, and he knew he wanted Eric to be one of them. Besides, they were going to be living together. Liam didn't want to blindside his roommate and co-worker by bringing home another guy. Well, if Liam ever brought over a guy, that is if he could ever work up the nerve to even talk to a guy he liked. No, not yet. Well, let me know. Janice has a lot of friends. I can hook you up, Eric said. Unless they're male. I think I'll pass, Liam said, trying to laugh it off. You're gay? No way. Why didn't you say anything? I'm bi. No kidding. Liam laughed and so did Eric. Yeah, I mean, Janice is the one and all that, but I've dated guys before, so if you need any advice, don't hesitate to come to me, Eric winked. Liam felt his face warm and went back to eating pizza, that he wasn't expecting. Eric being bi seemed almost surreal because of how attractive he was. With his sun-kissed skin, dirty blonde hair, and infectious smile, he was the whole package. Liam licked his lips and finished off his pizza. They decided they would work out a cleaning schedule tomorrow and call it a night since they had such a busy day. Liam went to his bedroom and crawled into the nice clean sheets that for once didn't stink of mold and stale donuts. Liam and Eric walked into the new state-of-the-art hockey arena, each lugging a duffel bag that felt like it was filled with bricks. The place was massive, with bright lights and shiny ice that looked like it had never seen a single scrape from a skate. Parents were already there with their kids, who looked like mini hockey players in their oversized gear. Liam could hardly contain his excitement. He was practically bouncing. In the locker room, they changed into their gear with Coach Volt. Eric was struggling with his skates and muttered, "If these things get any tighter, I'm going to need a rescue team to pull them off." Hey, at least you won't lose them on the ice. Liam chuckled. So, we're keeping it simple today. Just some skating techniques. We don't want any kids face planting on their first day, Coach Volt announced. Good call, Liam said, pulling on his jersey. We'll save the fancy stuff for later, when they're ready to show off for the choreographers. For now, we'll just make sure no one ends up as a human Zamboni. Liam snickered. Mon Dieu, some of these kids were really something, but they all look so damn cute in their uniforms. Liam was just about to put on his skates too when someone came sprinting into their locker room. Coach! A woman said. Her face flushed. She wore a black bodysuit and a see-through silk black skirt with leg warmers. We've got a huge freaking problem. Satan strikes again. Damn it! Coach Volt hissed. I can't get away. Class starts in 10 minutes. He turned to Eric, who already had his skates on, and then looked at me. Can you get Nicky? He always throws a tantrum right before practice starts. Nicky? Liam lit up. Nicolas Dupont? Sure. Show him where he is. Coach Volt instructed the girl with a smirk. Watch out, he bites. Liam raised an eyebrow, unsure if he was supposed to laugh or be genuinely concerned. He decided to go with a cautious chuckle and followed the girl out of the room. As they walked down the long, echoing corridor, the girl glanced at him sideways. So, just a heads up, Nicky's in that room. Well, let's just say he's the resident demon child. Demon child, Liam repeated, trying to keep his tone light. Mon Dieu! That sounded nothing like the sweet boy he'd saved from the fire. Then again, he didn't know much about Nicolas Dupont. Just that he was by himself when the fire happened, stuck with his nanny who didn't end up surviving. He must have been traumatized after, and Liam wondered if this was just a residual effect of that. Still, he felt a connection to the kid and figured that was why he was hired in the first place. Theo did say Nicholas was taken with him, and he was glad the kid remembered him from the fire anyway. Sounds charming. What, does he throw tantrums? The girl snorted. Tantrums? Try full-blown exorcist-level fits. Last week he somehow got a hold of a hockey stick and chased one of the choreographers around the rink. Poor guy nearly quit on the spot. Liam blinked, half wondering if she was joking, but the serious look on her face made him think twice. Great. So, I guess biting isn't off the table then? Definitely not, she said. They stopped in front of a door, and before Liam could ask any more questions, he heard it. A loud, blood-curdling scream from inside. It was the kind of scream that made you wonder if you should call an ambulance or an exorcist. Liam swallowed hard. That's Nicky. Yup, the girl said, not even flinching. Good luck. You'll need it. As she pushed open the door, Liam braced himself, half expecting to see a small child possessed by some dark force. Instead, he saw a kid with wild blonde hair and a scowl that could curdle milk, mid-tantrum, throwing what looked like a hockey helmet across the room. All the dancers were on the other side of the room, some holding onto the bar for dear life. Theo stood front and center, jaw working, and hands curled into fists. There was a light sheen of sweat covering his forehead, and they must have been in the middle of their dance routine when they had been interrupted. Liam tried not to linger on Theo, but his throat instantly went dry when he realized what the Rockstar was wearing. His leggings were skin-tight, along with another black crop top that stopped closer to his pecs, showing off more of his lean, muscular form. He wore a pair of baggy shorts over his leggings, but Liam could still make out the swell of his arse. Mon Dieu. Liam dragged his eyes away and forced himself to pay attention. I hate you! Nicky shrilled, kicking off his skates. They hurled in the air so far and so fast Liam ducked so that his face wasn't sliced to shreds. Jesus! What was this kid trying to do? Nicky, a tired voice sighed. Je te déteste! Nicolas screamed, stamping his tiny feet. Tu m'enlèves toujours des choses. C'est pour votre bien, maintenant. Comportez-vous bien. Je te déteste. Je te déteste. Je veux que ma mère revienne. Liam sighed internally. This was going to be fun. This kid certainly had a mouth on him. No wonder they called him a demon. But Liam wondered if what Nicky said was true, and that Theo did take everything away from him. It didn't matter anyway. Things were clearly taking a turn for the worst, and Liam wasn't sure who would try to kill who next. The vein in Theo's forehead throbbed, and before he could think, he jumped into their conversation. Hey! Hey! Calme-toi, Nicky. Pourquoi tu ne me dis pas ce qui se passe? Nicky blinked at him like he'd grown another head. Vous souvenez-vous de moi? Liam inched forward once he got his attention. Liam, remember. Liam de la Lemieux. I'm your new hockey coach. Why don't we leave your dad alone and you can come play with me? Nicky wrinkled his nose in disgust. Pourquoi devrais-je jouer avec un paysan comme toi? Liam's smile twitched. Okay, just who was this kid calling a peasant? It's either that or get more privileges taken away. Come, we will play. I bet you aren't any good anyway. Nicky huffed, sticking his nose in the air, and wore an expression that said, I'll show you who's good. He marched out of the room, and Liam hurried to pick up his skate and helmet. Theo shot him a grateful look, and Liam hurried after him. Nicky stormed onto the ice, not waiting for him, and disrupted the game that the others were currently playing by skating in the middle and stealing the puck. The other kids were so shocked they could do nothing but watch him score. Liam cursed, struggling to get on his skates and get on there before Nicky did something that would get them both in trouble. That's not fair, one of the kids grunted. Why does he always show off like that? Another snarled. It's a team effort. Duh. Nanny killer, one of the kids whispered. Everybody around him dies. He's a nanny killer. Fermez-la, Nicky screeched, and Liam could tell he was 10 seconds away from whipping off his helmet and throwing it at their face. Hey, Nicky, Liam coaxed, skating over to him. Why don't we train over here? I can show you some tricks, or you can try to show me. Come on, he said, tugging Nicky in the opposite direction and into the far corner of the rink. Nicky relented, still fuming. Liam thought it might be best to let the kid vent his anger, so they tried a few slap shots. He set up a net and some pucks, donned all the protective gear, and told Nicky to try and score on him. Nicky's jaw set, then he raised his stick and struck the puck so hard that it whistled past Liam's head and landed straight in the net. Liam's knees almost buckled. Mon Dieu, what the hell did he sign himself up for? The pucks came flying fast and furious, whipping at his head like wayward tennis balls. Each puck flew so fast and so hard that Liam felt his soul leave his body when he saw the near-manic look in the kid's eyes. By the end of it, Liam was slumped in the net, wheezing hard while the kid hadn't broken a sweat. Peasant, he muttered. He was good. No wonder he didn't want to play with the other kids. Maybe he wasn't being challenged enough. You're pretty good. Where did you learn to play like that? Please, in France we learn to play in our sleep, he muttered, his expression haughty. His accent was very thick, and Liam noticed he stammered over some of the English words. Well, that would explain why he never wanted to speak it. The kids here seemed ruthless, but Nicky wasn't going to learn if he spoke strictly in French. Where are you from? Saint-Emilion, the kid thrust his chin in the air. And you? Peasant? Saint-Bernard-des-Bois, Quebec, Liam said, leaning on his stick to catch his breath. Why don't we play a game next time? I'll teach you a few tricks. Nicky tilted his head. What tricks? How to not hold my stick properly, or how to get hit in the head 10 times with a puck. Liam laughed even as the insults were hurled at him. He liked this kid. Either way, At least you'll learn something. Better than tormenting your dad. That creature is not my father, Nicky sneered. He was merely a sperm donor. After Mama died, he just stuck around. Batard. Welp. Liam wasn't going to touch that can of worms. Still, it might be fun. What do you say? Why don't you try to fit your head up your ass? It might be better than all this bootlicking peasant. Nicky snorted. Liam smiled ruefully. I'm sure you have no shortage of bootlickers, but what about friends? What if I offer to be one of those? Nicky went quiet, regarding him for several moments. Coach Volt blew the whistle and signaled for Liam and Nicky to join them. Liam noticed how Nicky's jaw tightened, and he gripped the stick hard at the prospect of playing with the other kids who had just made fun of him. Demon. Nanny killer. Jesus, what were they saying to this kid? Liam felt a pang in his chest and realized that Nicky was far more alone than he initially thought. Hey, how about I tell him we're playing together and we can continue what we're doing? How does that sound? Nicky's mouth thinned. I think your hair is too long and your face looks stupid. That doesn't sound like a no, Liam probed. Nicky huffed. Fine. But that's only because you're too pathetic for words, peasant. Liam stifled a laugh and rushed over to Coach Volt. Even if the insults did make him feel a little self-conscious, at least the kid wasn't screaming. And Liam considered that a win. Chapter 5. Liam was almost positive he'd entered the 7th circle of hell the second he stepped inside the locker room. Clothes were strewn everywhere and several kids were screaming at the top of their lungs for their parents while Nicky was being held back by several bodyguards. Jesus, the day hadn't even started yet. Coach Volt was nursing a small bite on his arm, muttering to himself about Nicky behaving more like a feral dog. What happened? Coach Volt was just about to respond, but then Theo walked into the room with his entourage in tow. He was dressed in all black, with a black blazer and sleek black mirror sunglasses that hid his eyes. He clicked his tongue, and the bodyguards released Nicky. The kid at least had the decency to look ashamed of himself. He hung his head and then ran over to his father, burying his face in his father's shirt. Papa! Not another word, Theo hissed. He snapped his fingers and the kids were moved to a different area. Explain yourself. Nicky's bottom lip trembled. They were making fun of me. One of them called me a nanny killer and a monster. And you think your behavior wasn't in the least bit monstrous? The entourage behind Theo snickered, and Liam realized they were a few dancers from earlier and some bandmates. Papa! Nicky shrilled. Stop misbehaving! Theo snapped. Get dressed, you have hockey practice in 10 minutes. I don't want to hear another word out of you until then. Theo scraped his blunt nails over his forehead. Je te jure, ce gamin me donne un mal de tête terrible. Nicky's eyes filled with tears, and Liam noticed there were several bruises on his arm from where the other kids had hurt him too. Did Nicky start the fight, or was he simply defending himself? Excusez-moi, Liam injected, feeling his face warm when everyone turned to look at him. Perhaps it would be better if Nicky and I trained alone. That way the other kids won't bother him too much. Theo's eyes narrowed. What did you say? Liam cleared his throat. Yesterday we practiced alone and... He turned to Coach Volt for help, but he was shaking his head vigorously as if to tell Liam to shut up right now. But he straightened his spine, forcing himself to continue. Nicky and I spent the day practicing alone, and I thought it would be better for us to do so going forward. Theo's lip curled. Coach Volt, he barked, his voice like the crack of a whip causing the coach to jump. Do you think it is acceptable to have my son separated from the group when they are learning to practice for the choreography of Broken Sun on Ice? No, Coach Volt stuttered. It was just the first day. Isn't the first day the most imperative for learning the correct stances and moves on ice so that the children do not interfere with the dancers? Theo demanded. Why, yes, of course, it was just Nicky. I do not pay you for your excuses, Coach Volt, Theo continued, his gaze murderous. And you... He rounded on Liam, allowing Nicky to dissuade you to take him away from the rest of the class. Theo turned up his nose in disgust. Are you the child, or is he? The entourage snickered behind Theo and Liam bristled in anger. He clearly doesn't want to train with them. I can teach him myself if you let me. It does not matter what the child wants, Theo continued, and it was no wonder Nicky was the way that he was. The show must be perfect. Comprenez-vous, Monsieur de la Lemieux? Liam bit back his reply, his face so hot it felt like a brand was against his skin. Yes, Monsieur Dupont. Theo sighed rather dramatically, tossing his hair over his shoulder. He bent, muttering something to Nicky, and then gave him a light shove to the dressing room. Theo's eyes dragged over Liam one last time before he flitted out the door with his entourage in tow. Liam swallowed hard around the blockage in his throat and turned to Coach Volt, who looked furious. I'm sorry. Look, kid, Coach Volt said. I've been doing this job for 2 years, and there's one thing you have to understand. No matter what you think, Mr. Dupont is Nicky's father. You should allow him to discipline him how he sees fit. That child is too crafty. He almost started a brawl with all those kids, and he only gets off with a slap on the wrist. If it were my father, my hide would have been tanned. Do you understand? We have a strict schedule. I only allowed Nicky off that day because I knew his training with the rest of the group would be a challenge. But going forward, he needs to learn with the other hockey players. Sure, it's Little League, but we're already training for Broken Sun on Ice. Mr. Dupont has a brand and reputation to maintain. Got it? Keep your opinions to yourself. Coach Volt huffed. Okay, get ready. Eric is already on the ice waiting for us. Liam bit his lip and hurried to get changed. The chill of the ice rink hit him as he stepped onto the ice, joining the other kids for practice. They were all skating around, laughing, and passing the puck back and forth. But Liam couldn't help but notice Nicky. He seemed off, more than usual. Nicky barely spoke. He just skated where he was told, passed the puck when someone shouted at him, and kept his head down. The other kids weren't exactly subtle. They snickered behind his back, whispering things like, nanny killer and demon. Liam didn't get it. Why did Theo let him train with them if all they did was bully him? Sure, they had an ice skating show coming up, and playing hockey was supposed to help them bond as a team. But it was clear none of them liked Nicky. Not one bit. And yet, he knew Theo was right, though. Playing alone wouldn't help Nicky. It would just make him more of an outsider, especially with the choreography sessions coming up. But still, Liam couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't helping either. Nicky didn't deserve this, whatever his story was. The kid was difficult, sure, but he shouldn't be called a demon or monstrous. That type of language just didn't sit well with Liam. After practice, Liam went to the showers to get changed. Eric had plans with his fiancée, and Liam thought about dedicating some time to doing some shopping. He shrugged on a worn plaited button-up and some jeans, throwing his duffel bag over his shoulder. However, the second he walked out of the changing room, he saw Mary waiting for him. Mr. Dupont would like to speak with you, Mary said. Liam's brow wrinkled, but he followed after her, mouth thinned into a hard line as she led him to the choreographer's dance room, where some of the dancers and bandmates were hanging around, most of them standing close to Theo. One of the males was practically pressed up against him. Liam stood there for a while, not sure what he was supposed to be doing there. Theo caught his eye in the full-length mirror, and he jerked his head. All of you are dismissed, he said, but his voice was unusually deep. The one pressed up against him pouted, but eventually peeled himself away, grabbed his stuff, and walked out with the other dancers. Liam stood there, shifting from one foot to another. Theo had changed out of his black blazers and designer clothing. Now he was wearing something much worse. The tights left little to nothing to the imagination, and Liam felt his face warm, and he tried to look everywhere except at the prominent bulge in Theo's pants. Jesus, did this guy own any normal clothes? Liam's throat went dry when Theo began throwing on a long off-the-shoulder sweater. Come here, Theo instructed, placing his hand on the bar nearby. Liam set his duffel bag onto the floor and walked over to him, staring around the large dance room that had a full-length mirror that took up an entire wall and wrapped around the room, padded floors, and several bars for the dancers lined in a row near the corner of the room. Liam approached Theo and noticed with a start that Theo was several inches taller than him, and he had no idea why he never noticed that before. He was beautiful, in a theatrical kind of way. The sort of distant beauty you see with movie stars and TV actresses. Desirable, but completely unattainable. His grey eyes were flecked with silver, catching the light in a way that made them seem almost luminous, like the edge of a blade. Monsieur de la Lemieux, Theo breathed. How do you find your time here? Liam gulped. Fine. Good? I don't know. It's only been a few days. Theo smiled thinly. Oui. He sucked in a long breath. Exhausting, you mean? Nicky terrorizes everyone. Mon Dieu, think nothing of it. Why, though? Liam blurted out. He's not a bad kid. He's smart, very capable. Why doesn't he get along with them? Why do they call him Nanny Killer? Was it because he escaped the fire and she didn't? Theo's smile widened, amused. No, Nicholas and his warden did not get along. Some say he pushed her into the fire. Others say he locked her inside the room and let it all burn. Un démon jusqu'au bout. Theo flicked his hair over his shoulder. Ah, no matter. Nicky is taken with you, and I find myself curious about you as well. So, how about a compromise? What kind? Liam asked. You train Nicky on the side, keep him distracted, and then he will also train with the group so that he is not behind when the show starts. Avons-nous un accord? Theo stepped closer, almost crowding Liam's space, and he forced himself not to step back, his heart beating wildly. That means you'll be spending a lot of time with him. With us. Does that suit you, Monsieur de la Lemieux? You like saying my name, Liam breathed out, not realizing when the air between them came so thick. Theo laughed then. A real one. Not one of those fake smiles he'd seen plastered on the cover of magazines or at press conferences. I do. It kind of rolls off the tongue, no? Liam smiled too, ducking his head. Anyway, I should head out. I'll arrange everything with Coach Volt. And we'll talk soon, Theo said, brushing past him. Theo's scent was rich and layered, with hints of amber and vanilla that spread out slowly, creating a warm, sweet smell in the air. It filled Liam's nostrils, and he realized he was starting to become addicted to it. He watched Theo walk away, willing his heart to climb out of his throat. Eric and Liam walked through the sliding glass doors of Loblaws, the bright lights of the store welcoming them inside. The aisles were neatly stocked with colourful packages and fresh produce, and the air smelled of baked bread and fresh coffee from the in-store cafe. As they moved down the produce aisle, Liam grabbed a bunch of spinach. How was your date with Janice the other day? Great, Eric beamed. She's dying to see the apartment, so I might have her over in a few days. I hope that's okay. Why wouldn't it be? Liam asked. I don't know. I don't want to be one of those assholes that always have their girlfriends over, Eric laughed. Besides, you seem like you like a lot of space. I don't want to chase you out of your own apartment." "I'll be fine," Liam replied, smiling. "Besides, she seems cool. Anyone willing to put up with you is probably a saint." "Oh, shots fired," Eric scoffed. "Anyway, I heard you got into it with Theo the other day over Nikki. Godspeed, man. That kid is a wild card. He isn't worth losing your job over." Liam chewed on his bottom lip. "Yeah, What's his story anyway? He wasn't always a demon, right? Everyone treats him like a pariah, and it's weird." "No, it's not," Eric snorted. "You do know what they say about him, right? That he was the one who killed her, his nanny." Liam's eyes widened. "What?" "Yeah, man," Eric replied. "It was all over the news. Theo had him in counseling after Nicholas' mother committed suicide right in front of him, actually. That's how they found her. Turns out she'd been rotting in their French cottage for almost a week, hanging from the ceiling, and Nicholas had been locked inside the house with her. They only noticed because he used to torment one of the neighbor's children, and they realized he hadn't seen the kid in a few days, so they went looking for him." Eric shook his head. "It's sad, really." "Jesus," Liam thought, frowning. "So, his mother killed herself in front of her son? Do you know why?" Eric smiled ruefully. "Why else?" "Theo dumped her. She had been trying to get him back for years, it seemed, and became more mentally unstable as time wore on. I heard he divorced her and gave full custody to her and then disappeared. Obviously, she didn't like that. Anyway, I feel bad for the kid. I do, but still. After seeing all that, no wonder he grew up to be a little sociopath." "Don't call him that," Liam said, disturbed by it all. When he first rescued Nikki from the fire, he thought the kid looked so sweet, angelic almost, and when he spoke, Liam's heart had tightened. Eric shrugged and continued shopping, dumping all types of items into the cart that they could make for dinner later. "So, why do people think he killed his nanny?" Liam probed again. "I mean, why do the kids keep saying that?" "Because it's probably true," Eric replied flippantly. "Look, I don't know what went on, but it was a well-known secret he hated the German nanny his father tethered to him. Nicholas wasn't exactly the obedient type. But I heard," Eric said, lowering his voice. "When the firefighters did a full investigation, they found out the fire was started by an older plug-in, like a spark plug. It caught fire on the rug and then spread to the walls quickly because the building was so old. Nicholas was in the living room, but didn't even try to get out of the building." Liam's stomach filled with dread. "What do you mean?" "I mean, the kid literally laid there on the ground, not caring the entire apartment was going up in flames." Eric huffed, like it was obvious. "And what about the nanny?" "She was locked in the bathroom," Eric said. "I don't know how it happened, and none of it could be proven. But I heard Nicholas lock the door on her and waited for the fire to engulf the apartment." Liam shook his head. "Impossible." "That's what I thought, but look," Eric said, almost whispering now. "That apartment was freaking weird. All the locks were on the outside. I have no idea what that German lady was doing to him. But it was a well-known fact she had unusual disciplinary tactics. And for a kid like Nicholas..." Eric feigned a shudder. "Anyway, if you hadn't shown up, I'm sure the kid would have been Char by now." Liam swallowed around the blockage in his throat. Memories of the fire filled his head, and he thought back to when he'd first burst through the front door. Nicholas had just been lying there, curled up into a ball. And at first, Liam thought it must have been shock. However, when they got outside, Nicholas was lucid, awake, blank almost. He stared at Liam curiously, as if silently asking why he saved him and why he didn't leave him for dead. Liam had no clue what a child like that must be going through, struggling with his father's neglect and being passed from one unloving creature to the next, and he felt a fresh wave of sympathy for Nicholas. If Liam was going to train him, then he would do his best to protect him and keep Nicholas safe, even if his father was unwilling to. Besides, Liam knew what it was like to feel like he didn't have anyone in the world who cared about him. They finished packing away their groceries, and Liam listened to Eric ramble on about Janice and their plans for the evening, all the while making his own. The next day, Liam and Nicholas skated on the ice, the rink echoing with the sound of their skates. Liam had suggested that they meet before the rest of the team arrived. That way, he could keep Nicky distracted enough so that he wouldn't cause trouble during their practices. "How about I show you some new moves?" Liam asked. Nicky rolled his eyes. "Not this again. Do you think face-planting counts as new moves?" Liam laughed. "Sure. Why not? Come. Watch closely. I want to teach you how to score more efficiently." Nicholas scoffed but skated over anyway. "You want to use your inside edge to cut sharply. Think of it as a fancy way to avoid crashing into the boards," Liam said. Liam went through the moves slowly, demonstrating how to shift weight and control the puck. "Got it? Okay, your turn." Nicholas tried it himself, wobbling a bit but managing to pull it off. "Good job," Liam beamed. "Try to keep your knees bent and your stick closer to the ice." "How come you played like trash on our first day?" Nicholas muttered. "I was just caught off guard," Liam replied easily. "Don't judge a book by its cover. Besides, how do you think I got this job if I couldn't actually play?" "I wonder," Nicholas muttered. He chewed on his lower lip and then gave it another shot, this time with more confidence, and smirked when he got it right. "Looks like you aren't as dumb as you look, peasant," he said, snorting. Liam grinned, unruffled. Wow, flattery and an insult in one sentence. I must be doing something right. Progress, right? Yeah, you're not exactly terrible. I'm almost impressed." "Almost impressed? I'll take it. Just keep practicing, and you might even make me look good." "Why did you want this job anyway?" Nicola asked. "You seem like too much of a pushover to work for my father." Liam shrugged. "Do you want the long story or the short story?" "Long story short. I was about to be homeless before your dad offered me this job. But I think he did it because I saved your life. And the short story is, I've always wanted to play hockey. I'm a bit rusty, obviously, but your father has the right connections. I'm hoping to get into the league." "You?" Nicholas looked at him with disgust. "No way. I'd stick my foot into my mouth if you ever make it to the NHL." "Is that a dare?" Liam smirked. "Paisan insolente," Nicholas sneered. "Like you could ever be one of the greats." Liam chuckled. "Oh, come on. Even a peasant can dream big. Besides, have you forgotten about guys like Maurice Richard or Jean Béliveau?" Nicolas raised an eyebrow. "Richard? Béliveau? I suppose they were pretty good." "Pretty good?" Liam laughed. "They were legends. If I even come close to their level, I'll consider that a win." Nicholas shook his head, grinning despite himself. All right. I guess you've got some ambition. Maybe there's hope for you yet." "Thanks for the vote of confidence. And don't worry. If I make it to the NHL, I'll buy you lunch to celebrate." Nicholas regarded him. "Deal. And if you don't, I'll expect a detailed apology for making me listen to your pathetic hockey dreams. What about you?" "What do you want to do?" Liam asked. "I'm sure you have your own dreams." The light in Nicholas's eyes seemed to dim, and all the mirth from earlier fled from his face. "Shut up and teach me some moves. Do what you're being paid to do, peasant." Disappointment gnawed at him, not because he wanted to have a life chat in the middle of a hockey arena, but because he was curious about Nicholas and wanted to see what made the kid tick. Loud voices entering the arena caught his attention, and he saw Coach Volt coming onto the ice with the rest of the players. Nicholas skated away from him, his blank expression back firmly in place, and Liam sighed. Liam was learning to realize in this strange, absurd reality that every time he took one step forward, he took 5 more back. Chapter 6. Okay. So happy isn't exactly how he'd catalogue his emotions. It was more like bursting at the seams, backflipping, stomach-twisting excitement that made all the hair on his arm bristle the second he arrived at the complex Nicholas lived in. Apparently, being nice did have its perks, because Nicola had requested his presence for dinner that very same night. The invitation had been delivered by Marie, who looked like she'd rather be chewing rusty nails, as she invited him up to the Dupont residence for a formal sit-down dinner with Theo and Nicholas. Eric overheard their conversation, released a very manly squeal, and then demanded they go shopping immediately so that Liam didn't show up looking like a bum. They headed to the Goodwill across the street, and even though the suit he bought was nice, Liam still knew what he was, so he tried to have much more fun with it. Liam gripped the bottleneck in his hands, and the bodyguards guided him into the apartment, which was 10 times larger than the one he shared with Eric. Muffled voices filled the air, and Liam's stomach clenched. He wondered if Theo would scoff at his grocery store-bought bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon. His mother's family was from Aix in France and always told him it was rude to show up at someone's house empty-handed, so he bought some wine and a cherry pie. His mother always used to say, "Helping others is like pie. It's always better when you share a slice." And Liam was sure Nicholas needed more than just a slice. Voices from the den carried through the hallway, and Liam tried not to tense when he stepped inside what he assumed was a team meeting. There were several dancers he'd seen doing choreography with Theo, along with 3 bandmates who were laughing at something playing on one guy's phone. Theo was leaning against a mahogany desk, his arms crossed over a t-shirt button-up that gaped at the front, showing off his firm, pale chest. He wore a pair of white linen pants that hung low on his narrow hips, exposing the deep V-cut that made Liam's throat go dry. Jesus, did this guy own any normal clothes? And suddenly, Liam felt foolish in a suit and tie. The blazer was a hideous beige color Eric insisted matched his hair, and the tie had been checkered, looking more clownish than he'd have liked. But Eric said he looked good, and Liam didn't know much about these types of things, so he went along with it. He stood there, with the champagne clutched in his right hand and the pie in his other, waiting for them to notice him, shuffling his feet awkwardly. Theo was the first to look up. He tossed his hair over his shoulder, and his gaze slanted over to Liam. "Oh, you're here?" Theo pushed off the table, and everyone turned to look at him, making Liam's face flush. "And you brought gifts?" "My mother said it's rude to come without them," Liam muttered. "As is the way in France." Theo smiled, and it looked genuine this time. "Let me finish up here. You can sit in the dining room. I'll call Nicky." Liam ducked his head and hurried out of the room, the back of his neck burning. The bodyguard led him to the dining room, where a large spread was set out in front of him, looking more like a 10-course meal than his usual dinner. Liam gulped, fidgeting with his hands. The voices carried off and seemed to fade. Then Theo was sauntering into the room. He sat down at the very end of the table, his smile tight. "Nicky will be in shortly. That is if I can pull him away from his video games long enough, but feel free to start eating Monsieur de la Lemieux." Liam hated how much his body tingled whenever Theo spoke his name. It always seemed to roll off his tongue like honey. "I'll wait for Nicky, thanks." "Of course," Theo said softly. The waiter poured him the wine Liam brought, and he felt himself flush. "You don't have to drink it," Liam laughed. "It's probably crap. Nothing like the real Cabernet Sauvignon you'd get from France, that is. I'm sure you have better stuff to drink." Nonsense, Theo smiled. It is a gift. We shall try it together. What made you want to pick up a Cabernet Sauvignon? Theo brought the wine to his lips and sipped. No reason, Liam shrugged. I just find it interesting. It's a natural cross between Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc that happened in the 17th century in France, Liam babbled. Oh? Theo kinked a brow. And how do you know all this? You moonlighting as a sommelier now. I've read up on it. Liam smiled. Besides, my mother is from Saint-Bernard-de-Bois, and in the cathedrals we drink wine during communion. You know, holy Cabernet for the soul. Theo smirked. So, what you're saying is, you're practically a wine expert, thanks to your religious upbringing. Exactly, Liam said, trying to look serious. I've been trained to taste the divine from a young age. My palate is practically blessed. Theo chuckled. And here I thought you were just good at hockey. Turns out you're a connoisseur of the holy grape juice. Hey, someone's got to bring the culture to the ice. I'll be the first NHL player to recommend wine pairings with post-game meals. I like the sound of that, Theo chuckled. Although you don't strike me as a drinker, I must say, Monsieur de la Lemieux. I don't. Usually that is. Liam felt his face grow hot. At least, not compared to you guys. I'm sure my crappy wine doesn't hold even a fraction of flavor to yours. It isn't the flavor, but the company, Theo replied, his direct gaze causing Liam to squirm. Liam cleared his throat and took a drink, wondering when Nicholas would show up. How's the training going? Liam said, desperate to change the topic. Theo sighed. Good. Better than expected without the interruptions. I'm hoping to have fewer of those now that Nikki is occupied. Thank you, by the way. You don't know how much I appreciate it. It's nothing, Liam said, waving his hand. I grew up teaching kids in my hometown. I enjoy it, probably more than I should. Theo smiled thinly. I read that you have no formal education. How does one learn to coach hockey without it? Hockey can't be taught, Liam replied automatically. What I mean is, I just love to play. When I was in high school, I got a job acting as an assistant coach on the team. My father was very proud. He used to say, très fier en effet. Liam chuckled. It's a very small town, but I had bigger dreams, so I packed up my things and moved to Toronto. I wanted to become citadin. I don't know the word in English. City dweller? Theo provided, steepling his hands in front of him. Oui, Liam said, then looked away. I am trying to learn to speak more English. However, when I am with you and Nikki, I find it impossible. Theo chuckled, his deep baritone voice licking down his spine. Ah, l'anglais est le fléau de mon existence, tellement monotone, tellement ennuyeux, tellement rigide et pas aussi mélodieux que le français. Liam bit his lip, trying not to laugh. To most French people, English was a challenge in its own right, and Theo hit the nail on the head. It did sound quite monotone, but Liam was making an effort to speak it more so that he could understand it. I am a country bumpkin. As they say, I want to be more city-like. I understand. When I first came here, A loud voice cut Theo off, and Liam heard Nicholas right before he saw him. Nicholas came stomping into the room, his face flushed red as he glared at his father. Why are we eating here? We never eat here! Nicola barked, looking annoyed and furious at having his game interrupted. Can't you see we have a guest? Theo snapped. Sit down so we can eat. A guest? Nicholas shot his gaze toward Liam, who almost shrank in his seat. Him? What the hell is he doing here? Nicky, Theo said, his nostrils flaring. Sit down. Nicholas grumbled and sat down, clearly peeved. Liam's brow wrinkled, thinking back to what Mary said. Wasn't Nicholas the one who invited him over? Liam pressed his lips together and didn't say anything else. The dining room was tastefully decorated, with elegant place settings and a centerpiece of fresh flowers. The smell of food filled the room, making Liam's stomach growl quietly. A maid entered, carrying a tray with plates of steaming food. She placed them in front of each of them with a polite nod before retreating silently. Liam looked down at his plate, trying to avoid eye contact with Nicholas. The awkward silence hung heavily in the air, almost as thick as the tension between them. Nicholas picked up his fork and poked at his food, clearly lost in his own thoughts. "So," Liam started, trying to break the silence, but the words stuck in his throat. He wasn't sure what to say, especially with Nicholas looking so irritated. "What?" Nicholas hissed like a feral cat. "What video games do you play?" "Oh, I'm into a bunch of different stuff. Mostly first-person shooters like Call of Duty and Counter-Strike. I like the fast-paced action." "Seriously?" "I play those too. Nothing like getting yelled at by strangers over the internet to brighten your day," Liam chuckled. "Exactly. And I also dive into RPGs like The Witcher and Skyrim. Nothing like a bit of dragon slaying and potion brewing to take the edge off." "Same here. I've spent way too many hours chasing down monsters. Have you ever tried Dragon Age? It's like The Witcher, but with more questionable fashion choices." Nicholas leaned forward in his chair. "Yeah, I've tried it. It's like they took medieval fantasy and added a serious dose of what were they thinking. I also play strategy games like Civilization and StarCraft." Liam laughed. "Ah, Civilization. The game where you can build an empire and still get defeated by a 5-year-old in a single move." "Pretty much. I also hit up sports games like FIFA and NBA 2K when I want to feel like I'm actually good at something. I didn't think a peasant like you knew much about playing video games." "Why is that?" "Even peasants like having fun too," Liam replied. "Debatable," Nicholas said. "What are you doing here anyway?" Theo cleared his throat. "Eat your food, Nicholas." Nicolas' eyes narrowed, but he ate his food, and so did Liam. "Maybe," Liam spoke, "after dinner we can play something together, if you have time." "Tu veux que je te botte le derrière dans un jeu vidéo?" Nicolas scoffed. "Fine. I think I wouldn't mind playing against you. I'm in dire need of amusement, it seems." Liam smiled, drinking his wine. "Not too long," Theo said. "You have school and then practice tomorrow. I want you on your best behavior." "Even if I was, you wouldn't even notice," Nicholas scoffed. "What did you say?" Theo gritted out. "Nothing," Nicholas muttered. "Can I go now?" "No," Theo snapped. "Finish everything. I don't want you pestering the staff at night for food when you haven't finished your dinner." "I'm not even that hungry. Why am I being forced to sit here anyway? You hate having dinner with me." "Nicky." Theo snarled. The vein in his forehead pulsed, and Nicholas quieted immediately. Liam grew up with his brother, so he knew what family dinners were like. But it seemed like Nicholas and Theo hardly spent any time together, so it would explain why Nicholas was always acting out. They finished the meal in silence, Theo gripping the fork until his knuckles were white, and Liam wishing he could melt into the floorboards. "I'm finished. Can I go now?" Nicholas demanded when his plate was cleared. Theo regarded him for a moment, and then nodded. Nicholas got up from his chair and then turned to Liam. "What are you waiting for? Aren't you coming? I think we should start with StarCraft, and we can work our way up." Liam hurried to wipe his mouth with his napkin and stood from the table. "All right." He turned to Theo, who waved his hand in dismissal, still sipping the wine. "You lying fascist!" Nicola grunted, and Liam laughed. Nicholas and Liam sat cross-legged on the floor in front of a massive flat-screen TV, the kind that cost more than Liam's life. The room was dimly lit by the glowing screen, with posters of sci-fi battles and action heroes covering the walls. They were deep into a game of StarCraft, the virtual battlefield buzzing with energy, and Liam hadn't lied when he said he played video games too. Nicholas had just underestimated him. They were barely 10 minutes into the game when the door creaked open, flooding the room with light. Theo walked in, a look of mild exasperation on his face. "Nicholas, it's time for bed." Nicholas groaned, barely looking away from the screen. "Come on, Papa, we're in the middle of a game." Theo crossed his arms. "It's 10 minutes past your bedtime. I don't want you playing all night." "But Papa!" "Now, Nicky," Theo snapped, "say good night to Monsieur de la Lemieux." Nicolas scowled. "Fine, good night." He ended the game, tossing the mouse onto the ground violently and storming into his bedroom. Liam was disappointed, but he stamped it down. As much as he wanted to play video games all night too, he knew he should probably get going. He stood, wiping his hands on his black slacks. Theo was blocking the door and Liam shot him a sheepish smile. "I should call it a night too." "How about a nightcap?" Theo said, regarding him. "Oh, I thought you said—" "Nicky can be grumpy when he doesn't get his sleep, but it's still early," Theo said. However, something in his gaze made Liam feel like he was an animal on display, weirdly exposed. He swallowed and nodded, following Theo out of the room. They walked in silence for several moments as Theo led him to a gallery he didn't realize was in the adjacent room. It was lined with pictures of the Renaissance paintings. Most Liam recognized, but others were a mystery to him. A wineglass was shoved into his hand, long, slender fingers dragged across his skin in a way that made Liam's heart tick up in overdrive. "Do you know who painted them?" Liam took a sip of his wine and realized with a start that it was much stronger than the one he had earlier. This one had a robust, intense flavor that hit his palate with deep, velvety notes. It was a rich, powerful blend of dark cherry, black currant, and a hint of smoky oak. The wine had a long, warming finish, with just a touch of spice that lingered pleasantly. A Chateau Margaux, probably. If he drank any more, he was sure the floor would become the sea. Theo stepped behind him, and Liam stiffened, feeling the heat emanating from his body. "Tell me, what do you see?" Theo said, his voice a deep rumble. Liam blinked twice, his throat suddenly dry. Well, I see the painting's landscape. The way Bourdon has used palm trees to create a setting in biblical Egypt. It's quite impressive." Theo paused. "You've studied the classics?" Liam nodded. "My mother taught me. Aside from that, growing up in the church, you tend to learn a lot more than you want to about Christianity. Then again, Bourdon was known for his unique style." Theo leaned in closer, his breath warm on Liam's neck. "Yes, Bourdon's approach to biblical Egypt is fascinating. He borrowed elements from Poussin's works, but there's something more geometric in his composition." "Right, the grouping of Pharaoh's daughter and her handmaidens into a perfect square. It's almost like he's aiming for a sense of order and precision that's not as apparent in Poussin's work." Liam tilted his head, trying to focus on the painting while feeling Theo's presence. "Anyway, my assessment is elementary at best." "Oui," Theo whispered, then stepped back. "I find you quite fascinating myself, if I'm being honest, Monsieur de la Lemieux. You aren't at all what you appear to be." Liam took a long gulp of his drink. "What do you mean?" He turned to face Theo, who was watching him, and Liam realized with a start that his feet were bare. It shouldn't have been as sexy as it was, but Liam found it incredibly titillating for some reason, to see his long, slender arches, elegant toes. Everything about Theo was very sensual, almost as if he were a god gracing mortals with his presence. Theo flicked his wrist. You have no formal education, yet you know some of the classics. You know your wines, and you're cordial, respectful, albeit odd. In French, I'd say, je suis une contradiction ambulante, un mélange de chaos et d'ordre. Liam smiled ruefully. I am a walking contradiction, a mix of chaos and order. I guess, Liam spoke, you wouldn't be wrong. Or... Theo stepped closer to him, crowding his space. Liam was backed into the wall, his face flaming. Are you a wolf in sheep's clothing? A faux intellectual who thinks they are smarter than they actually are? An amalgamation of facts and fictions, chaos and order, only to be exposed as nothing more than lies covered in sweet nectar. Liam's heart hammered. He stared into Theo's steel eyes and realized with a start that Theo was trying to get a read on him. Heat flared across his belly, making it cramp. He wanted to squirm away from those eyes, the storm clouds rolling in cumulative thunder. Are you the self-proclaimed country bumpkin, or the wine connoisseur hiding in your parents' cathedral? Theo's hot breath brushed over his cheek. Who is Monsieur de la Lemieux? I'm... Liam was beyond flustered. He had no idea what was happening right now, but the closer Theo got, the more Liam started to panic. I'm none of those things. I'm just a lowly dropout college student, a failed hockey player. I'm not that interesting, I promise you. And yet... Theo cut him off. You've managed to tame a monster. Theo lifted his hand, tucking a stray hair behind Liam's ear. How does one tame a monster? Unless... His voice dropped lower. We monsters recognize our own. Liam flinched, startling so hard his elbow knocked into the wall. Theo peered down his nose at him, his pink lips curling into a smile. Sir? A voice said, and Liam almost jumped again. One of the bodyguards were standing at the door. Raphael Bellamy is on line 1 and is insisting he speak to you. Raphael Bellamy? The Raphael Bellamy? The famous singer from the hit band Eclipse Symphony, a renowned international group known for their fusion of classical and contemporary music. Liam's inner fan was screaming, but he tried to keep his cool. Theo gritted his teeth and stepped away. Fine. I'll take the call in my study, Theo said. He turned back to Liam. You may go. Liam nodded, slipping past Theo. Bonne nuit. Thanks for having me. Theo paused, his gaze deep and alluring. Bonne nuit, Monsieur de la Lemieux, Theo said, his voice dripping like honey. Liam fled, his palms wet with sweat and his entire body set alight with burning fire enough to singe his soul.
Chapter 7. Theo. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Again, Madeline commanded the dancers. Their arms extended gracefully, fingertips brushing the air as they glided across the floor. Feet pointed and precise, they leaped and landed with a soft thud, maintaining their elegant poise. A gentle rain pattered against the full-size bay windows, the glass opaque enough that Theo could sense more than see the city lights flickering below, dancing like the reflection of stars on a rippling pond, casting a soft glow that blurred the line between the rain-soaked streets and the sky above. Theo was unabashedly shameless last night, using his son Nicholas as an excuse to see Liam. Shameless indeed, he thought, lips curling almost involuntarily at Liam's doe-eyed deer-in-the-headlights look. It was something that seemed to catch inside his chest, a burr of some kind, or barbed wire, whichever one he wasn't sure. All he knew was that he wanted more of it. Theo walked over to the balcony, ignoring the questioning looks and whispers, pushing open the dual doors and looking up into the threatening sky of clouds. The drizzle was soft on his face, dampening air already curling his hair, the cold cement beneath his bare feet, leading him to the edge of the railing and the city that plunged below. The height was enough to make anyone dizzy, but this was nothing compared to the skyscrapers in Paris or the yawning castles in Château de Saint-Germain-en-Laye. A numbness spread throughout his entire body, and his throat closed the more he thought about his home, deserted now and taken by fire, burnt to ashes. Theo's thoughts wandered back to Liam, the country bumpkin that reminded him too much of himself at that age, and he felt a laugh bubble from his throat. It was shameless. A man of his age chasing a boy of 19 while he was pushing 33. Desperation? A midlife crisis? Theo didn't know which was worse, but he relished in it. He was curious about the awkward hockey player, whose skin seemed like it was on too tight. Liam was jittery, flinching at every noise, and sounds like a frightened doe. It shouldn't have ignited him as much as it did. "Hey, everything okay?" Mary asked, her heels clicking on the cement floor. "I'll be out in a minute." Theo lit a smoke, watching it curl like a small cloud before being doused in the rain. Mary waved the smoke away and hurried inside. Theo stood there, his hands shoved deep into his shorts, smoke curling around his mouth, thinking hard about a boy who captured his attention with a mere smile. A dove? A canary? Theo couldn't tell. Theo hadn't wanted to when they first met in the hospital that awful evening when he'd gotten the call. Liam's eyes had assaulted him, splintered right into his chest like sharp wooden stakes. It alarmed him at first, and the alarm gave way to maddening fury. He's been sober for 5 years. 5 years of endless restraint, tiresome AA meetings, and counsellors drilling his responsibilities into his head. And all it took was one look from the dove, and he'd been plunged into the abyss all over again. Theo wanted a drink. To be precise, he wanted to dunk his head into a barrel of vodka and drown in it. Only monsters recognize other monsters. "C'est vraiment de la pacotille," Theo scoffed, tossing his cigarette away. He went back inside, soaking wet, and continued on with his stretches. His bandmates came around him then, all of them talking excitedly at once about their new single set to release. Theo braced his arms against the bar, slouching back, jutting his narrow hips forward in a lazy, almost sleazy stance. Eli glued himself to his side, chatting a mile a minute. "So," the cutie purred, "when are you going to feature me in your new single?" Theo almost smiled genuinely at that. Instead, he turned to Le Petit Imbécile, a nickname he had for many of the dancers who thought that by screwing him, they would be elevated beyond their station. Eli latched onto his arm, his short brown hair and manicured nails giving nothing away, but it was that viperous expression that suddenly made Theo feel infinitely tired. "Soon," Theo replied. He patted his arm and then gently moved it away. "Let's get back to practice. Madeline is waiting for us. S'il vous plaît." Theo walked back into the middle of the dance floor and got into position with the dancers. The rehearsal was rigorous and unrelenting. Every movement was precise, every step demanding perfection. Yet all Theo felt was the piercing pain of addiction, like the sting of a scorpion's venom. He wanted a drink, needed it. Thoughts whirled around his brain and he shook, sweat dripping down his brow as Madeline forced him into a grueling routine with the other dancers. He sang until his lungs burned, thrusting himself into the music, gyrating his hips, giving himself free rein to feel the lyrics as they thrummed through his soul. His guitarist burst into an electrifying zither, and then the keyboard blasted, They were really jamming. This was what Theo lived for. When it was done, Theo was left gasping, his heart tripping almost out of his chest. It was a good day. The bandmates were discussing maybe having another recording session soon, but Theo was adamant about finishing this tour before they started working on any new material. "What about the rift?" Jace asked, his mop of black hair falling nearly down to his spine. "Do you think it could be longer?" "Any longer and it might as well be a brand new song," Kayla, our pianist, muttered. "You're a little late when you chime in on the chorus," Mary chastised Kayla, who flipped her off, and then she turned to Theo. "Raphael Bellamy called again." Theo was drenched in sweat, struggling to breathe, and still, a laugh managed to burst out of him. "Raphael Bellamy? Again?" "Twice in 2 days?" he asked, and Mary kinked a brow at him. "Fine. I'll talk to him tonight." "Need I remind you the last time you spoke to him?" "Veuillez arrêter de parler. Je ne veux plus entendre un mot. Je serai prudent." Mary shot him a nasty look. "One of these days I'm going to learn French and you won't be able to swear at me so frequently." Theo shot her a lecherous smile and stood, holding his hand out for a towel. She slapped it into his palm, and he used it to wipe the sweat from his brow. They walked out of the dance room, Mary filling him in on the schedule she had planned for today, which included meeting with their producers, practicing with the band, interviews with the press, and a photo shoot with Vogue. Theo was walking past the arena and stopped when he saw Nicholas there on the ice, smiling and laughing at something Liam had said to him. Annoyance twisted in his gut at their easy ebb and flow of conversation. It was something Theo had never really managed with his ill-bred demon child. The brat had taken after his mother, cursing and sneering at his existence before Theo even had a chance to speak. It wasn't until Amélie had committed suicide 5 years ago that Theo forced himself to reevaluate his drug-fueled life and get sober for his son. "Mr. Dupont?" Mary asked, dragging him from his thoughts. "I want to have lunch with Nicholas and make sure Liam comes too," Theo said. Mary beamed at him, and Theo resisted the urge to roll his eyes. His therapist had said regular mealtimes were a great bonding activity with children, not that Theo could stand the sight of Nicholas for too long. And it wasn't that he hated his son, he just didn't understand him. Nicholas had been away from civilization too long, locked up in the countryside with nothing but Amélie's insane rantings and ravings to keep him company. Back then, Theo hadn't cared that he had a son. He wanted nothing to do with the tiresome groupie who deluded herself into thinking they were something they weren't. He'd paid her a handsome sum of money and told her to get lost. Only she didn't. Amélie called. Amélie texted. Amélie showed up at every concert and show, the baby on her hips, screaming at him to take responsibility. Then Amélie went to the press. It was the never-ending headache, a blistering type of annoyance only the buzzing of flies swarming a steaming pile of crap could provide. Theo didn't like being annoyed, so he threatened to sue, and that's when things got much worse. Amélie cut her wrists, bled out in the bathtub with Nicholas not far away, and locked all the doors in the tiny house in southern France. Theo got the news pissed drunk and high off something he couldn't name. Nicholas was his now. They didn't know what to do with each other. How could his life include a child? The absurdity of it all. C'était complètement fou. And yet, Nicolas had his mother's cruel eyes and his father's lashing tongue. Un prédateur artistique. A blue-eyed demon who got rid of every teacher, every nanny, every person who tried to get close to him would magically and conveniently disappear. Either they quit or through other means, and Theo wondered, desperately, what was so different about Liam. Monsieur de la Lemieux. They looked quite similar, except where Nicholas's eyes were ocean blue, Liam's were more like the deep water seas, bottomless, fathomless depths. He spoke of the church and cathedral, everything he was used to in his home in France, of the restraint, the fear, the choking despair of keeping yourself coiled tight until you screamed. Theo was intrigued, to say the least. He could have anyone he wanted, any boy or girl who took his fancy, and he often did. But Liam seemed much more different. It was that curiosity that felt like a thorn in his skin, a thistle in his chest. The college dropout who knew about Renaissance paintings, Cabernet Sauvignon, and things no normal 19-year-old would speak about. And old soul, perhaps? Theo frowned. No, that didn't seem quite right. Liam will eventually show his monstrous nature. He was convinced he was nothing more than a shaman. Un prétentieux, un chaman, an escroc. And yet, something with those eyes was a serene pool that beckoned with a magnetic allure, slowly dragging you into their peaceful depths. And Theo to his death. Liam licked his dry, thin lips, looking much too small at such a large dining room table. Theo relished how uncomfortable he seemed to be, shifting and shuffling in his seat as if waiting for someone to jump out of the shadows and yell that it was all a prank. Nicholas was his usual bratty self, complaining about this or that, and Theo gripped the fork until his knuckles were white. Papa, I don't like Coach Volt. Why do we have to keep him? Because the other coaches quit, Theo muttered. So? Nicholas continued. I don't like him. He doesn't teach us anything cool the way Liam does. Cet enfant est vraiment trop. Theo took a deep breath. Nicolas, eat your food. It was one of the things his therapist warned him about, the not eating, the distraction, the rapid moods that changed so fast it gave Theo whiplash. Nicholas was doing more than lashing out. He was trying to find a way to deal with his trauma. Be patient, they said. It'll get better, they said. Theo gritted his teeth, turning his inquisitive gaze to Liam, who sat ramrod straight. His plaid shirt was slightly dirty, and his jeans were threadbare. How are you finding the hockey training so far? Très bien, Liam said, chewing on his bottom lip. I think Nicholas has improved a lot. I wonder, do we have games? Even though we are mainly training for the Broken Sun on Ice consort, do we still play games? Oui, Theo replied. In fact, you should have one coming up. He would have to check with Mary for the schedule, but he'd hoped Nicholas would be on his best behaviour until then. I don't want to go, Nicholas pouted. Papa, don't make me go. Eat your food, Theo snapped, wishing he was drinking something stronger than this wine. Theo was very mindful of his consumption, never overindulging after years of AA meetings, but Nicholas was really testing his patience. Papa, don't make me go. Coach Volt never lets me play, and always forces me to sit on the bench, even though I'm the best player on the team. Well, maybe if you didn't attack the other players like a rabid dog, he wouldn't be forced to bench you, Theo snarled. Eat your food. I won't say it again, Nicholas. Nicholas pouted, pushing the food around on his plate, and Theo almost blew a gasket. Cet enfant serait sa perte. Hey, do you want to race? Liam said. I bet I can finish my food faster than you. Nicholas perked up immediately, and they began eating their food, clearing their plates. Theo deflated in relief once all the food was finished, and Liam was patting his flat stomach. That was delicious. Thank you. Merci. C'est un plaisir. Do you want to play a video game? Nicholas asked. Sure, No, you have homework, and I have a meeting with Vogue. Go to your room, Theo said. Nicholas's face fell and he huffed, getting out of his chair and racing upstairs to his room. Theo smiled thinly at Liam, and then stood. I need to shower and get changed. Do you mind? Why do you treat him like that? Liam asked. His eyes were downcast and his voice was low. Theo blinked at him. Like... what? Like you tolerate him, Liam said. I wouldn't mind playing with him if it's only for a few hours. Theo scoffed. This was the maddening thing about Liam, that stupid, doe-eyed expression, as if he knew more about his own son than Theo did. He needs to study. He cannot sit and play video games all day. I will not allow it. He doesn't have any friends, Liam said, standing slowly. Don't you know that? The words knocked the wind out of Theo, and he felt heat crawl over his face at Liam's gentle chastising. No, he didn't know that. Nicholas had always been a somewhat eccentric child. He just didn't realize it had gotten so bad, to the point that he was completely ostracized. I'll play with him, Liam continued, His head ducked. Will you let me? It was a loaded question, but Theo found himself relenting before he was even conscious of it. How can I say no to you? Theo smiled. Fine, 1 hour, any more than that, and he'll be driving me crazy. Liam beamed, clasping his arm tightly. Merci, merci. Vous ne le regretterez pas. He raced off into the direction of Nicholas's room, and Theo pursed his lips, watching him, ignoring the way his arm tingled from where Liam had touched him. It was fine, he thought, until the tingling gave way to a blazing wildfire. Chapter 8. Theo. For a time, Nicholas's mercurial moods seemed to soften, like a balm over blistering flesh. The demon child was soothed and distracted, and Theo was finally allowed some peace. At first it unnerved him, the way all things did concerning Nicholas, raised by his demoness mother and thrust into the world of mortals. Things were finally quiet, but Theo wasn't sure he could trust it. The silence. Whenever it came into his life, it always seemed dark and foreboding, a prelude to terror and unspeakable things. Theo took a drag of his cigarette, staring out the window, thoughts musing back to Liam and wondering what the bumpkin was doing now. And then we have another photo shoot. Second a meeting with Jimmy Kimmel Live, Mary spoke. Jimmy Kimmel? Jesus, the guys have been after you since you won your first Grammy. He has everyone on his show, though. He eats more dicks than hot meals. Danny laughed. Anyway, Mary said, shooting him a dirty look, he would like you to fly out to LA as soon as possible to do the interview. Mary paced the room, her heels clicking on the floor. No interviews, Theo said. It's been several years since her death. Danny, the PR rep said. You can't avoid them any longer, especially with Broken Sun on Ice coming up. Besides, people are dying to see you and the band together. Just one interview. It'll be a hit. And what do you propose we do with Nikki? Theo turned to face them. My darling child will surely cause a raucous, no doubt destroying all of your efforts to make it a fabulous hit. Take him with you, Danny shrugged. You don't have children, do you, Danny? Theo sighed. Danny laughed, his brown eyes wrinkling at the sides. Heck no, and I don't plan to. Besides that, you have that hockey player to distract Nikki. I think you should bring them both. Coach and the others have nothing but good things to say about him. I don't see the problem. Theo frowned. Bring them both? To LA? Well, Nikki for sure, but yeah, why not? Danny replied. A romantic weekend getaway with Liam? He hadn't thought of that and wondered what Liam would say. Well, he knew anything regarding Nicholas Liam would be ecstatic for, but if Theo could just get him alone for maybe a second... Fine, arrange it then. The phone rang and Mary picked it up immediately. Mr. Dupont's office? Oh, yeah, he's right here. Mary turned to look at him. Raphael Bellamy. Pourquoi ce type doit-il le tourmenter? Theo grabbed the phone. What? He snarled, not in the mood for this. I need to see you. Please, it's urgent. Non, Theo. Raphael begged and it made Theo's stomach twist. Please, it's bad. I need you. Come see me. Qu'est-ce qui se passe, bon sang? Theo's anger flared to life. Espèce d'idiot! Do you think I can just get away whenever you call me? Yes, because you owe me. I need you. Hurry. The phone clicked off, and Theo gritted his teeth. Damn, Raphael. He rued the day he ever got into business with the singer. Theo rubbed the bridge of his nose, his eyes closed as if this could soothe the headache mounting with each breath. Ready my car. I'll go see Raphael. Wait, Mary said. I don't think that's a good idea. Raphael isn't the most stable. He's in trouble, Theo said through clenched teeth. Anyway, I need to see him. Let me go, Danny said. What if the press gets wind of it? Then I'll deal with it, Theo said. Have Nikki and Liam waiting for me upon my return. Theo's limo slid to a stop in front of the crumbling apartment complex, the sleek black car looking out of place. He sent a quick text to Raphael. "I'm here," and barely had time to tuck his phone away before the back door flew open. Raphael darted inside, his movements quick and frantic. The moment he landed on the seat, the paparazzi came pouring out of the building, cameras flashing, feet pounding the pavement as they raced after the car. "Go! Go!" Theo shouted, his voice tight. The driver hit the gas and the limo sped away, leaving the chaos behind. Raphael leaned back in his seat, panting, then suddenly started laughing, the sound shaky and wild. His face was marked with dark circles under his hazel eyes, and his buzzed hair only made his tired beauty stand out more. Out of nowhere, Raphael lunged at Theo, wrapping him in a tight embrace. He buried his face in Theo's shoulder and breathed in deep. "What are you? A dog? Why are you sniffing me?" Theo grumbled, his fingers digging into the soft leather seat. Raphael didn't let go, just snuggled closer. My hero." Theo pushed him off with a sigh. "Quit messing around." Raphael backed away, still laughing, his face almost manic. Theo tried to rein in his temper, but he was getting tired of Raphael's stunts. They lapsed into a tense silence, with Theo steaming in the corner of the limo and Raphael lightly chuckling to himself. The second he pulled up to the apartment, he instructed his driver to take Raphael around the back while he went back to his office to finish up his meeting with his team. "You don't want to come with me?" Raphael asked, teasing the lapels of his jacket that exposed his firm chest. True to fashion, Raphael wore an obscene outfit with a large fur coat, despite the rain, and underneath some fishnet t-shirt and leather pants. "Shut up and get changed!" Theo barked at him, not pausing his strides and heading straight into his office. Mary and Danny were still waiting there, but judging by the looks on their faces, his little meeting with Raphael had already hit the front page news. "TMZ just reported it," Mary said somewhat dramatically. "Theo Dupont spotted with ex-lover Raphael Bellamy, lead singer of the band Eclipse Symphony and business partner. They'll find another bone to chew on by morning. Is everything set for LA?" Theo asked, changing the subject. He couldn't care less what they printed about him and Raphael. They hadn't been together in over 5 years, and it was a real shame Raphael couldn't get his life together long enough to remember that Theo was no longer interested in him. "They're waiting for you in the living room," Mary said with a sigh. Theo nodded and headed straight there, his heart beating wildly. Nicholas was showing Liam something on his phone, but the second he locked eyes with the young man, his heart seemed like it wanted to flee his chest. Liam stood gingerly, his dirty blonde hair wild with curls and his neat dark grey button-up shirt stretching across his chest nicely. It was his demure expression that rose a feral need inside Theo's chest, a raging desire like torrent waters bursting through a hole in the dam. "Hello," Liam said softly. "Bonjour, Monsieur de la Lemieux," Theo drawled, not missing the way Liam's eyes dragged over his entire body. "Papa?" Nicholas asked. "Are we going away?" "Oui," Theo said. "I have business to attend to in LA and an interview of sorts and would like it if you'd accompany me." "Both of us?" Nicholas beamed. "Oui," Theo replied. "Get dressed. Our plane leaves within the hour. We should be gone tonight and be back on Sunday evening." "Wait," Liam said, looking unsure of himself. "Are you sure you want me to come?" "Unless you have other plans." Theo shrugged like it wasn't a big deal, but disappointment threatened to drown him. "No, Okay, I will pack and be back here," Liam replied, giving him a genuine smile. It was nothing more than a small pull of his lips, but Theo's desire flared hotly. What was it about this boy that got him so riled up? It made no sense to him, and it wasn't like Liam was doing anything particularly sensual. Nicholas and Liam went to grab their things to meet back here, while Theo texted the pilot so that the jet would be waiting for them with some refreshments before they arrived. A light shuffling of feet caught his attention, and he looked up to see Raphael staggering into the living room. His face was still flushed, hazel eyes rimmed red, but he was dressed down in sweats and a white tank top. "Going somewhere?" Theo squinted at him. "Yes, now shut up and lie low," Don't do anything stupid until you've recovered. Raphael slumped onto the couch, laughing again. You aren't going to ask what his name is? I don't care what his name is, Raphael, or whoever else you decide to stick your dick into, Theo replied. Not even a little. Raphael chuckled. We need to discuss the business. Later, as you can see, I am quite busy, Theo gritted out. Ah, yes. With the little demon and his hockey hero, Raphael snorted. I saw him when he just walked in. Cute, innocent, just your type. Raphael paused, regarding him. I wonder what he'd think of you if he really knew the truth, eh? If he knew that Nicholas wasn't the only demon. Theo left the room. He had enough of Raphael's poisonous tongue for one evening, and he wasn't going to let him ruin his time spent with Liam or his son. However, as he packed his things, an inkling of fear settled in his stomach. Liam couldn't know the truth. Theo wouldn't allow it to taint his innocence, an innocence he was so sure up until then was real. Or some semblance of real. He decided that Liam wasn't the monster he thought he was, and the only monster here was him. Theo sucked in a harsh breath, his composure slipping. God, why did Raphael have to ruin everything for him? Why did he have to smash what little peace Theo had after Amélie died? Rubbing his temples, he popped an aspirin into his mouth and hurried to pack his suitcase for the weekend. Theo took a drag from his cigarette, lounging, well more like sprawling on the private jet seats with his other bandmates. Soft, lofty music thrummed in the speakers, making Theo's body feel loose and boneless. Ali sat on his lap, stroking his hair, playing with the long blonde strands between his fingertips. Theo stroked his thigh, higher and higher on his textured, checkered pants. They share smoke from his cigarette, and Theo admires how compact Ali feels in his lap. Smooth and weightless almost. He barely weighs a stone. Ali, his backup singer, squirmed a bit and Theo shot him a warning look. What? Ali slurred. The small table was covered in drinks, vodka, Bacardi, all of his favourites. It seemed as if trying to torment him, but Theo's been sober for years, and being around hard liquor wasn't going to send him into a tailspin, at least not as much as staring at Liam will. Speak of the devil, Theo thought, looking into the far distance of the plane and spotting Nicky and Liam huddled together over some tablet. Irritation sparked within him, but he stamped it down quickly. At least Nicholas was so preoccupied he wasn't screaming. That was always a plus. Someone has tamed the beast, Kayla muttered. She was sitting on Jace's lap, and Mickey, Andrew and Neil were in the seats behind them, talking quietly to each other. Broken Sun was an amalgamation of people from all walks of life Theo had met, some like his lead guitarist and bass player he'd met backpacking through Europe. Others he'd met during his tours and hit it off. Back then, everything had been about the music, sweet and like syrup through his veins, hitting that note, chasing the high, relishing in the rush of the crowd, bodies thriving with passion and sweat. What's the deal with him anyway? Neil asked, keeping his eyes fixated on Liam. Why didn't he join us? We don't bite. That's debatable, Kayla muttered. Neil scoffed, tossing his black hair away from his eyes. Sure. I doubt the bossman is thinking that since he spent the last half hour staring at Liam like he's his next meal. The others chuckled and Theo rolled his eyes. I have not. Have, Neil teased. So, what's the deal with him? Is he going to be a regular on our trips? Honestly, Theo hasn't thought about it, and he's ashamed of how much he wants it to be so. Imagine Liam being there with him, not only to calm Nicholas down, but as a companion of sorts. A boyfriend. The words make something flutter in his stomach, and he stamped his cigarette out on the ashtray. How's the next song coming along? I think for the entrance we should do more fireworks this time. More fireworks, he says, Mary scoffed, sitting several feet away typing furiously on her laptop. We have enough fireworks, Theo. What do you want to do? Set the stadium on fire. Something like that, Theo replied, smiling ruefully. They continued their conversation until their plane landed in LA. By then it was close to 9 p.m., and Nicholas was fast asleep in his chair, snoring lightly. Theo walked over to his son and bent to pick him up, Liam was sleeping too, and startled when he felt a presence nearby. "Oh," Liam said, sounding sleepy. "Merci." Theo nodded as he tucked Nicholas's head under his chin. "Did you enjoy the flight?" Liam's thin lip tugged into a smile, his eyes bright and alert. "Yes, thank you. Have we landed?" Theo nodded. "We're about to disembark now." He hiked Nicholas higher on his hips and walked out of the plane. Their driver took them to one of the hotels that was booked out for the broken sun with security armed to the teeth. He bid his bandmates good night and tucked Nicholas into the bed, brushing his son's blonde hair away from his face. There was something infinitely enduring about Nicky when he was still, silent, and it made Theo's chest tighten when he thought about all the ways he'd wronged his son by not being there, by being too doped out of his mind on drugs and cheap thrills to neglect him so thoroughly. Theo closed his bedroom door with a soft click and caught Liam lurking in the halls, a sheepish grin on his face. I don't know which room I'm in." Theo regarded him, leaning casually against the wall and shoving his hands into his black slacks that hung low on his hips. He watched Liam's eyes drop down to his stomach and then hurriedly skitter away, a flush on his high cheeks. "I'll show you." He pushed off the wall, strolling down a long corridor to a bedroom right beside Nicholas's. He watched Liam get settled inside, still watching him. "Merci," Liam said. "Care for a nightcap?" Liam looked startled for a moment, chewing on his bottom lip. "Sure. I'm not that tired and I slept a lot on the plane." "Good," Theo replied. He turned to walk out of the room, knowing that Liam was right behind him, and led him to a private den that was reserved just for him. The hotel was an exclusive resort, and even had its own recording studio built in. Theo stepped into the private den. The dim lights cast a golden glow over the room, highlighting the deep mahogany walls and plush velvet furnishings. Soft, lofty music drifted through the space, and his eyes swept over the antique art pieces, the crystal decanter set atop a marble bar. He poured 2 glasses of Chateau Lafite 1869, the deep red liquid catching the light. His pulse quickened, each throb in sync with Liam's nearness, the wine's aroma mingling with the intoxicating tension between them. Liam accepted the glass and their fingers brushed. So, Theo mimicked, enjoying watching Liam squirm underneath his gaze. "Do you come here often?" Liam said, taking a sip. "Often enough," Theo replied. "With Nicky? And others," Theo shrugged, draining his glass and pouring another. "Oh." Liam chewed on his lip, which was blood red from the wine and the abuse from his teeth. Theo's entire body throbbed. "What's this?" Liam asked, pointing to a platinum record label that was mounted on the wall. Theo raised an eyebrow. "Broken Sun's first induction into the Hall of Fame was in America," he said. "Back then, we'd only been known as Soleil Brisé. But in France, our first concert was at the Auditorium de Lyon. I had a lover back then, and we made love all night in the back pews after the show." "Raphael Bellamy," Liam guessed. Theo's smile thinned. "Oui." He reached for Liam's glass and refilled it. "An old lover." "Sorry, I saw his face in the paper and assumed—" "I shouldn't have," Liam replied. "What's to assume? We're friends. Business partners." Theo scratched his chin. "There's nothing between us. Not that Raphael wouldn't want there to be. It was young love, I suppose. 10 years of chasing dreams, tangled sheets, and whispered promises that faded with time. Autant en emporte le vent." Do you miss it? France, I mean," Liam asked. "She is my home." "Je suis elle. Elle et moi," Theo replied, taking a step forward to pass Liam his drink. Their fingers brushed again. Liam's face held a healthy glow, and he stepped back as soon as he held the drink, and it prompted Theo to step forward. "How about you, Monsieur de la Lemieux? Do you miss your home in Saint-Bernard-des-Bois?" Theo's voice lowered into a seductive rumble. Sometimes, Liam stuttered, taking another step back, and Theo couldn't help but follow. I liked it there enough, playing hockey and spending time with my family. Liam's throat dry clicked. I wouldn't mind going back if my parents accepted me. They don't? Theo whispered. How come? Liam's entire face was burning now, and Theo kept stepping closer to him until Liam was backed into a wall. Mr. Dupont. Theo, he corrected, tracking Liam's mouth. Call me Theo. Theo! Liam choked out. I don't understand. Oh, I'm sure you do. Theo's mouth curled, dipping his head lower, taking in Liam's scent. He smelled pure and crisp, reminiscent of freshly washed linens, with just a hint of soap that gave off a subtly clean and comforting fragrance. Il est gentil, the type of sweetness that lingers on your tongue and floods your mouth with warmth. Theo was bending down before he was even conscious of it, but the firm hand on his chest forced him to freeze. Liam was shaking. Wait, I don't know what to do. Theo's heart melts even more. He moved, cupping the back of Liam's neck, threading his fingers in his hair, and dragged him closer, so close his breath was ghosting over Liam's cheek, and he could count the lashes lining his wide blue eyes. I'll show you. It's nothing at first, a glide of 2 plush lips touching his, and yet it sinks down, coiling deep inside him like electric cables inside his blood. Time stopped, then started up again, and a blast of desire slammed through him. Theo grunted, yanking Liam closer. Liam made a noise in his throat, startled and unsure, and Theo filled the space between with his tongue. He teased Liam's lips, hands roaming, feeling the muscles beneath Liam's thin t-shirt. Theo was boiling from the heat, the world spinning out of orbit, teeth clashing. Theo's hands were everywhere, his shoulders, his chest, his waist, clawing and yanking at the fabric in a desperate attempt to tether himself. Liam squeaked, overwhelmed and pained, forcing Theo to yank off his lips. Theo couldn't stop touching him, kissing down his neck, sucking beneath his jaw, licking his skin, and hauling him closer as if he were a man dying of thirst, and Liam was a moist fruit. Their bodies were pressed together, Liam practically on his toes, drawing strained, ragged breaths. Theo has never felt like this before. He wants Liam, but he wants to do things right. To court him, make Liam feel special, feel desired. Theo didn't know which one of them was shaking, but Liam seemed almost shell-shocked, his blunt nails digging into the meat of Theo's shoulder. Theo, Liam rasped, throat tight. They'll exist in a bubble, Theo thought, a private world where Liam doesn't hold back, where they could be themselves and the world couldn't touch them. Theo pulled away, gazing down at Liam. His lips were slicked and wet, abused from Theo's near-rabid kisses. The taste of innocence, saccharine, delectable. Theo never thought he'd have the chance to ever indulge in such a delicacy. Liam stared at him, open and bare, slowly reaching up to thread his fingers through Theo's long hair, gripping his waist in a vice grip like he was gearing himself up for something. Good? Very good, Liam replied, breathless. Although, I think my technique could use some more work. Theo's mouth curved, and he jerked Liam closer, breathing him in. Then, mon cher, let me get straight to work. Chapter 9. Theo. Liam's mouth yielded like a moist peach, its sweet nectar spilling onto his tongue, leaving a sticky trail of summer warmth. Theo felt ravenous, fisting Liam's hair, dragging him so close there was nowhere to tell where he ended, and Liam began. He ached for more, to haul Liam back to his room and thoroughly demolish whatever was left of his innocence. Theo felt neck-deep in rapture. It was only when Liam pulled off, breathless and shaking, that he turned his attention to Liam's neck, sucking and biting at the skin as if he couldn't get enough. Theo! Liam whined, hot and desperate against his skin, curling a hand in the hair at the nape of his neck. crushing his firm body to Theo's. God, it's enough to make him go mad. He yanked another cry from Liam's lips, and the blunt nails digging into his skin were superb. The pleasure was unrivaled, peerless, his blood was kerosene, and Liam was the match. Combustible. A fresh swell of possessiveness rose within him, and he pressed violent kisses on Liam's cheeks, before devouring his lips once more, both of them gasping in each other's mouths, Theo rocking and panting against the light touch, desperate and wanton but past the point of caring. Je te veux, laisse-moi t'avoir. The words tumble out of his mouth like an avalanche from his heart. He watched Liam still, pull back slightly, his eyes blown wide and frightened. Those murky pools blinked, once, twice, and suddenly Liam seemed to remember where he was and who he was with. He moved to step back, but there was nowhere to go. Mr. Dupont, he laughed, but there wasn't anything remotely funny about this. I should. He gestured toward the door, and Theo's stomach clenched. Was it too fast? Probably, considering this had been Liam's first kiss. Patience. Mon Dieu. Patience. He could have that. Theo stepped away, peering down at Liam. Okay. Good night. Good night, Liam whispered, then tripped over his own 2 feet, staggering a little. Theo watched Liam rush out the door, a chuckle escaping as the tension of the moment dissolved. He felt something stir within him, a spark that had been missing for so long. Suddenly, inspiration hit him like a wave crashing on the shore. He dropped into the nearest chair, grabbed a notebook, and began scribbling down lyrics. The words flowed easily like they'd been waiting for this exact moment. His heart pounded in rhythm, his pen moving faster than his thoughts. The melody hummed in his mind, and for the first time in nearly 2 years, the music was alive again. Theo woke the next morning invigorated, eager to get a start to the day. He called the band for a quick rehearsal before they went on Jimmy Kimmel Live. Nicholas had been cranky that morning after he realized he forgot to pack his video games and proceeded to sulk most of the day. Theo did his best to ignore him. He shot Liam salacious looks during breakfast, making sure to brush his fingers over Liam's shoulder whenever he passed him. Mary saw the gesture, her gaze narrowing at him in warning, but Theo ignored her too. Last night had been amazing, and he wasn't going to pretend otherwise, even if Mary was planning to murder him in his sleep. Theo and the band arrived at Jimmy Kimmel Live, the lights and energy buzzing in the air. Theo's all-black glittering blazer caught the light, reflecting flashes from every direction, nothing but bare skin beneath it. His skin-tight slacks hugged his legs, leaving his ankles exposed, and dark eyeliner framed his sharp eyes. His tousled blonde hair fell perfectly messy, giving him that effortless Rockstar look. As they stepped on stage, the crowd's roar thrummed in his ears. Thunderous applause welcomed them, and Theo bowed, shaking Jimmy Kimmel's hand. Cameras flashed, cheers echoed, and in that moment, Theo felt like live wire. This was everything. "Welcome, broken son!" Jimmy Kimmel beamed, his energy infectious. "Back again for your 6th tour. How did it feel to get a 6th Grammy nomination?" "Merci, Jimmy. It feels like déjà vu," Theo replied, smirking. "But we might need a bigger shelf soon." 6 Grammys? Not bad for a group named after a broken celestial body. What can I say? Even the sun has its moments of brilliance. The crowd laughed, and Theo winked. "And your skin routine must make all the girls jealous, myself included." "So, what's your secret?" Jimmy asked, leaning on his folded hands and blinking up at him comically. "I bathe in blood." Theo smiled and Jimmy laughed. "Virgin for sure, right?" Jimmy snickered. "So, I heard you have a brand new documentary series coming up about your rise to fame. Aside from all the horrors you've been through, including the drug addictions and your partner's suicide, dealing with the aftermath of your son finding her body. I heard you're 5 years completely sober. Congratulations, man." "Merci," Theo replied. "I still indulge now and then, but I am proud to say I am clean, thanks to all these wonderful people around me, and my son Nicholas." Yeah, I heard Kayla was the one who drove you to the rehab center and didn't let you leave, Jimmy said, turning his attention to Kayla. That's an understatement. Kayla chuckled, her eyes crinkling. Theo is the heart and soul of Broken Sun, and it was either that or I'd wring his neck for the 15th time, but we're so proud of him and everything he's accomplished. Kayla was sitting with the others on the elevated couch staged behind them. She touched his shoulder, and Theo leaned into it. Yeah, it's crazy, Jimmy said. You guys have been together, what, 10 years? I'm sure you've been through hell and back. I mean, you guys made it to the Hall of Fame. I even heard that a boardwalk cement slab has your handprints on it in Lion. That's pretty legendary. Theo grinned. Jimmy, we've survived a decade of chaos, bad hair days, and more broken guitars than I can count. But hey, at least our handprints are immortalized. That's a plus, Jimmy beamed, then went on to ask Neil, Ali, and Andrew some more questions about their previous addictions and how they coped with them. The band was used to the media probing and answered each question with finesse. When it was over, they had a small break and then were led to center stage where they would perform their hit single, It Wasn't Me. Theo took a deep breath, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline flood his veins. The lights dimmed, leaving the band as dark silhouettes against the stage. The crowd hushed, waiting. A single spotlight flickered on, casting a soft glow on Theo as he stepped forward, mic in hand. The director gave him a nod, and he launched into the first note. His voice was smooth, sultry, cutting through the silence like a blade. The band followed his lead, the music building, layer by layer, as the lights slowly brightened. Theo's hips swayed in time with the beat, his movements fluid, seductive as he poured himself into the lyrics. Theo grabbed the mic, his voice pouring like honey, thick and sweet. The crowd roared, heads banging in time with the beat. His hips moved, slow and teasing, drawing every eye in the room. The music throbbed, pulsing in his veins, his lungs burning as he belted out the chorus. Ali, on her knees, dark curls flying, fingers dancing over his guitar strings, fishnet gloves catching the light. Neil hammered the drums, head back, sweat shining in the hollow of his throat. Kayla's hands flew across the keyboard, veins popping, knuckles white. Theo slinked forward, weaving through the stage lights. He tossed his head back, voice soaring, body leaping higher than anyone thought possible. His mouth opened wide, a red blur, veins straining in his neck, black blazer swirling around him like feathers caught in the wind. Jace stepped forward, fingers poised over the guitar strings. He struck the first chord, and the sound exploded like fireworks, sharp and electric. His fingers danced, moving faster than the eye could follow, each note crisp and clear, slicing through the heavy rhythm. The solo soared, a wild, untamed riff that echoed through the venue, bouncing off the walls. Jace's eyes were closed, lost in the music, his whole body swaying with the melody. His guitar screamed, bending notes that twisted and turned, taking the audience on a wild ride. His hand slid down the neck of the guitar, hitting the final high note that rang out, hanging in the air like a last breath before silence. The crowd erupted, their cheers crashing like waves, and Jace opened his eyes, a satisfied smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. The crowd went wild. This was the moment. This was everything. Theo bounced into his dressing room, laughing at Kayla and Jace as they tripped over each other to sit down. Damn, what a rush. Theo was breathless, leaning against the side table. He lit a smoke and took a deep drag. Ali wrapped his arms around him like an octopus, nuzzling against his skin. I think that's the best we've ever played since London. Hell yeah! Ali bellowed, pressing a kiss to Theo's cheek. Mary came into the dressing room, wearing a bright red dress that showed off her curves. Great show, everyone! People are still going wild, she beamed. And that rift! You know, I think you might be right, and we can make it longer. Told you, Jace said smugly. Trust me, everyone will love it. Andrew scoffed, twirling his drumsticks in his hand. Please stop inflating his ego anymore, and I think his head will explode. Shut up, Jace muttered. If you screw up the beat again, I'll cut off your family jewels and use them as a chew toy for my dog. Sounds kinky, Andrew winked, and I wouldn't be coming in late if Neil came in on time. Why am I being dragged into this? Neil demanded. You should be glad I even bother showing up to these things. Ice Queen! Kayla and Jace said in unison, then collapsing into fits of giggles. Theo watched them through hooded eyes, still buzzing from earlier. Ali stroked his hips, drawing small, neat circles down his back and lower spine, and Theo shot him a curious look. They had slept together on and off during the years, but Ali was too much of a good friend to ruin things by getting into a relationship, so Theo kept a respectable distance between them. However, Ali tended to get a little too touchy-feely. Where is Nikki? Theo asked, taking another drag. Here, Mary said, then gestured for Nikki and Liam to come into the dressing room. Theo straightened immediately, brushing Ali's hands away and smoothing back his drenched hair. Nikki looked miserable. His shoulders slumped and his mouth was twisted in a sneer. Liam flashed him a tight smile. Good show, he said. Thank you for inviting me. We didn't invite you, Ali replied, shooting Theo a tired look. Liam's face flushed. Either way, thank you. My mama used to say a good song is like a comfy sweater. Makes you feel warm and cozy, no matter the weather. Everyone stared at him. I think I just threw up in my mouth, Kayla muttered. Please don't ever describe our rock band like that ever again, Neil warned, then turned to Nikki. What died in your cereal demon? Nicholas shot him a nasty look. Nothing. Just hearing your awful playing has given me a headache and now I want to go home. I didn't know little sociopaths had opinions, Neil replied. He pinched Nikki's cheeks and Nikki slapped his hand away violently. Wow, relax, I'm just joking around. Ah, Liam cleared his throat. Maybe we should... I want to go home! Nicholas turned to Theo, his eyes blazing. I never wanted to come on this stupid trip in the first place. Keep your voice down, Nikki, Theo replied, his mood souring. No, I don't have my video games and everyone here is a jerk. Je déteste être ici, et je te déteste. Je veux rentrer chez moi. Je veux rentrer chez moi. And this is why we can't have nice things, Neil, Kayla muttered. Ta musique est nulle. Tu es nul. Je déteste être ici. Nicholas screamed, and Theo knew he was on the cusp of a full-blown tantrum. All the good vibes from earlier fled the room, and Theo's anger flared in his chest. Theo was annoyed. He didn't like being annoyed. And the demon strikes again. Andrew snickered. That lasted what? 24 hours. Nah, my bet was on 2, Jace sighed. So much for tranquility. Je veux rentrer chez moi. And how do you propose we get you home? Flying? We will leave when it's time and not a second before then. Go wait in the car. Nikki snarled, grabbing a cup off the table and whipping it at Theo. I hate you! Nikki! Liam hurried to grab him, steering the flailing child out of the room. Theo pinched the bridge of his nose, trying to quell the pounding in his head. Well, that could have gone worse, Kayla said. Theo sneered, striding out of the room. He hated when Nikki got like this, but since he was his father, it was his duty to calm him down. Liam had ushered him into another room and was gently consoling him while Nikki cried. Theo sighed, watching them. Nicholas always knew how to be theatrical when it came to his tantrums, and Theo never knew what would set him off sometimes. Theo rapped his knuckles on the door, and Liam stood, walking over to him and closing the door shut behind him. I just got him to calm down, Liam said, but his mouth was thinned into a hard line. Okay, let me see him before we head out. I don't think that's a good idea, Liam said, his voice firm. Shock skittered through him and Theo's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? You just... Liam straightened his spine. You heard what they were saying about him. Nikki was fine before... Liam's mouth slammed shut and his hands curled into fists. Why do you let them torment him? What? What are you talking about? They call him a demon, a sociopath. Liam spoke, but he looked horrified. He's 12. Theo felt like he'd been doused with cold water, shame crawled over his skin, and he hadn't realised when his bandmate started ridiculing his son. Then again, Theo had done so regularly, referring to Nicholas as his demon child. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. Disappointment flashed in Liam's gaze, and he took a step back. Maybe you should give him some space for now. Me as well. Liam. Theo reached for him, but Liam backed further away. Thank you, Mr. Dupont, but I can call a cab, and Nicholas and I can find our own way back to the hotel. Liam slipped inside the room and closed the door. Theo stood there for a long time staring at the closed door, feeling the sting of regret and the bitter taste of loss.
Chapter 10. Liam. To say Liam felt disturbed would be an understatement. Molten anger roiled through him as Theo's bandmates started ridiculing Nicholas. He felt a sharp prick of disgust at these grown adults not understanding how difficult it was for children to, number one, fly to a different country on such short notice, and number two, be left floundering and surrounded by a bunch of people they didn't know. Did Theo just expect Nicholas to be comfortable with that? Didn't he understand they were in a strange place and a strange country? It was jarring enough for Liam, and he was a grown adult. Theo hadn't even checked in with Nicholas once since they boarded the plane, too preoccupied with his bandmates to realize that Nicholas hated flying. He'd spent most of the flight clutching Liam's arm and shivering violently. Staring out the window, Liam gently stroked Nicholas's blonde hair, threading his fingers through it to help him sleep. Wispy clouds floated past, thin and delicate, almost like strands of white hair trailing in the wind. Liam was about to drift off, but loud laughter made him grit his teeth. The band was huddled together in the far corner, drinking and talking about the show a few nights ago. One of the women, who Liam later realized was the pianist, was the loudest, hurling insults at her bandmates and trying to shout suggestions for new sets at Theo, who was apparently in the cockpit with the pilots. The plane stank of cheap booze and cigarettes, no place for a child to be, and Liam wondered why Theo had thought it was a good idea to bring Nicholas with him. One of the guitar players shouted for more shots, and annoyance pricked down Liam's spine. Jesus, it wasn't even noon yet. Nicholas's brow wrinkled and his mouth pursed into a thin line. Last night, Nicholas had barely slept. Being in a new environment seemed to set him on edge. On top of that, he didn't have anything familiar around him. Liam noticed that Nicola clung to his video games as if they were his lifeline, and Liam wondered if it was his way of having a maternal substitute. Nicholas's mother was dead, his father absent, and from what Liam read, he didn't really want to have a child. Perhaps Nicholas had developed some psychological attachment to his video games as a way of coping with the stress in his life. Another loud laughter cut into his thoughts, and Liam was moving before he could think. "I'll be right back," he whispered to Nicholas, and gently got up, putting a stuffed pillow in his place for Nicholas to lay his head. Liam straightened his spine, striding over to the rowdy group. "Hey, do you think you can keep it down?" They paused, staring at him. One guy kinked a brow at him. He was draped back in his chair, and he wore skin-tight jeans and a gaping shirt. He was the one Liam had seen practically climbing onto Theo's lap after the kiss they had shared the night before. Liam's jaw worked, and he stared at him back, his gaze unyielding. "Why?" the pianist scoffed. "If you couldn't tell, this is a private jet." "Nicky is trying to sleep," Liam explained, patiently, he might add. "He hasn't been sleeping these last few days, so I just ask that you keep it down." "Oh," the bass player muttered. "Why didn't you say that to begin with?" he scoffed. "All demons need their beauty sleep, right? I wouldn't want to wake the monster up before we land, or we'll be stuck 10,000 feet in the air with a screeching banshee. The only screeching banshees on the plane right now are you, Liam snapped, hating how casually they said horrible things about Nicholas. The bass player's expression darkened. Who pissed in your Cheerios? Now keep it down, please, and thank you, Liam said, pivoting on his heel and walking away. Who the hell does he think he is? Talking to me like that? He sneered, getting to his feet while the others were whispering and tugging him back down. What's going on? Liam heard Theo ask, just as he took his seat once again in the back. He did his best to ignore them. Liam put the pillow on his lap, and Nicholas immediately rested his head there, snuggling deeper. I think Bambi just went beast mode on Neil, the pianist snickered. She lowered her voice and explained what happened. Liam kept his gaze fixed out of the window, not bothering to glance at Theo as he marched his way over. Hey, is everything okay? Theo asked. Liam turned to look at him, keeping his expression neutral, and definitely not staring at Theo's glittering see-through tank top and corduroy burgundy jeans that hung low on his hips. Oui, Liam said. Nicholas needs to sleep. He hasn't been sleeping the past few days. Theo cocked his head and nodded, lapsing into silence. Liam tried not to fidget, but he felt Theo's gaze on him, and it made his scalp tingle. After the interview with Jimmy Kimmel, Liam had been excited to see the bandmates in the dressing room. That was until he walked in and saw Ali practically wrapped around Theo like a leaking hose. And probably just as wet, Liam might add. Liam's mood took a dive into the dumpster after that, and he'd spent half the night thinking about that damn kiss over and over again until he felt numb. It shouldn't have been anything special. Who cares if it was his first kiss ever since coming out? Who cares that his stomach had snarled at the prospect of doing it again? Theo had his pick of the litter, and Liam was nothing more than the runt. So, when Theo came to his room the next day, smiling brightly and with an apology on his lips, asking if Liam wanted to see LA with him, Liam had promptly shut it down, claiming he had a monstrous headache and couldn't go anywhere or see anything, despite aching to do so. Now things were so unbearably awkward. Liam half considered flinging himself out of the plane just to escape it. Theo gave another nod, mostly to himself. I'll tell them to quiet down, Theo said finally. Okay. They stared at each other, and then Theo left. Liam went back to staring out the window. The clouds passed slowly, their edges soft and blurry. The sun didn't break through as much now, leaving a shadow over the sky. Once the plane landed, Liam reluctantly left Nicholas and headed back to his apartment. It was Sunday night, and he had practice the next day with Coach Volt and Eric. He spent most of the day sleeping, doing some laundry, and watching TV. Nothing had changed, or at least that's what Liam tried to convince himself, even though locking lips with your boss, an international rock star, might be considered a big change to most people. He sighed and got ready for bed. The next day, at hockey practice, Liam ran drills with the other kids, but Nicholas seemed distant, not talking as much as usual. Liam's heart clenched, but he didn't push it. Eric skated over, his brown eyes bright with a grin. What? Why are you smiling so much? It's creeping me out, Liam said. Eric laughed. Good news, bro. I found a hockey team nearby looking for 2 new players. Tryouts are tonight. What do you think? I think you've taken too many puck slap shots to the head, Liam muttered. How can we play hockey and do this coaching job full time? It's only 3 times a week and in the evenings, Eric replied, chuckling. Come on, I already put your name in. Besides, you said you played hockey on your farm and came here to play pro, so come with me. If I say no, will you leave me alone? Liam asked, considering the possibilities. This coaching job was solid, and he could see himself working with Coach Volt for the foreseeable future. But wouldn't it be amazing to play pro for a real hockey team? It was his dream. Sure thing, Eric beamed. It's at the Mattamy Athletic Center. You know, the former Maple Leaf Gardens. It's for an up-and-coming junior hockey team. And I heard scouts come regularly. You'd be a shoo-in to go pro. What's the name of the team? Liam asked. Toronto Red Blades, Eric said, puffing out his chest. Our colors are red and white. They also have really cool skates with red blazes, so that helps. Liam shrugged. What could it hurt? Cool. I'll meet you later. It's downtown, so we have to take the subway there, but we should head out at about 4. Liam nodded, and Eric skated away. As soon as he was alone on the ice, a flutter of nervousness and giddiness danced in Liam's stomach. The thought of trying out for a junior hockey league team sent a thrill through him. It had been a while since he'd seriously considered pursuing hockey again. When he first arrived here, he'd been rusty, his moves not as sharp as they used to be. But now, after weeks of practice and drills, he'd found his rhythm again, feeling the old confidence returning. He skated a few more laps, pushing himself to go faster, to feel the burn in his muscles. His mind raced with possibilities. Joining a team, competing again? Just thinking about it made his heart pound. Could he really do this? Was he ready? With a deep breath, Liam decided. He would give it everything he had. Why do I let you talk me into doing stupid things? Liam moaned while Eric practically dragged him onto the rink. To say it was competitive would be an understatement. He watched various men vault down the rink, their skates slicing through the ice like a scalpel. He felt like an idiot in his gear, sweating through his thick grey sweater, his knees knocking together. Meanwhile, Eric stood tall and confident, even waving to some of the guys he knew. How long have you known about this? Liam asked, eyebrow kinked. The whole time, Eric said, flashing him a charming smile. Come on. I knew if I told you on the first day you wouldn't want to come. Just relax. You'll do great. The tryout started and Liam's stomach twisted with anxiety. They went through passing drills, shooting practice, and quick sprints. Liam stumbled a bit at first, but he managed to keep up. He didn't do as well as Eric, who dazzled on the ice with his usual skill. After they finished, Liam was out of breath, but relieved. Well, I didn't embarrass myself too much. You did great. We'll find out next week if they want us on the team. Next time, remind me not to let you talk me into things. Liam shook his head, a small smile tugging at his lips. Hey, those stupid things may get you into the junior leagues, so you're welcome. Eric was talking a mile a minute when they returned to the complex, talking about the guys that he had met and how he was eager to join the team. So, all those nights you weren't visiting Janice? Liam asked. Eric looked away. Sometimes. Yeah, whatever, Liam huffed. They rounded the corner and Liam stopped dead when he saw that Theo was standing at his door waiting for him. 4 hulking bodyguards stood behind him and Eric gulped. Mr. Dupont! Sir, we were just... Eric spluttered, his entire face flushing red. Yes. Well, I came to see Monsieur de la Lemieux for a moment, Theo said, shoving his hands deep into his pockets. Can we talk? He directed the question at Liam, looking almost shy. He wore a grey sweater crop top and grey sweats. Jesus, didn't this guy have any normal clothing? Eric's eyes were bulging out of his head at this point, and Liam felt like his face was about to combust. Sure, he squeaked and opened the apartment door. Eric was the first to slither inside, dropping his duffel bag near the laundry room and practically sprinting like Usain Bolt to his bedroom. Liam held the door for Theo and his bodyguards, who Theo instructed to wait for him outside. The door clicked shut behind him, and Liam immediately went to his fridge to get some water. He offered Theo some, but he declined. Liam's hand shook as he clutched the water bottle. drinking so quickly that he nearly choked, trying to drown out the shock of Theo Dupont standing right there in his kitchen. Theo cleared his throat. I wanted to apologize. I've spoken to Nicky and apologized to him. To be honest, I'm ashamed, Monsieur de la Lemieux. Liam swallowed, nodding. Don't be. I get it. I don't think you do. Theo smiled thinly. Amélie died when Nicolas was 7. We hadn't spoken since then. I didn't know anything about him or raising a child. Theo traced his finger over the granite countertop, his face drawn with exhaustion. I was young and stupid at the time. I tried to get sober for him. Relapsed 100 times. It wasn't until I woke up one day, hungover with Nicholas screaming at the top of his lungs, that my heart had stopped. You see, I had gotten so drunk I'd locked him in the linen closet, the party raging around us. It was bad. C'était très mauvais. Le pire que ça ait jamais été, Theo muttered. Nicolas did not speak to me for a week. Only then did I realize I needed to get sober. For him. It's been a long 5 years, and sometimes I forget. His gaze lifted. But you make me remember. Liam's mouth parted softly, taking in his words. Theo's eyes were the color of ash on a cold morning, and held a quiet, mysterious depth that made it hard to look away. I'm a nobody, Liam responded lamely. Don't mention it. Mon cher, Theo chuckled at him. I don't think you're a nobody. You stood up to Neil, one of the best guitarists in the world, and told him where to shove it. Anybody who does that has my deepest respect. Liam laughed. I was kind of rude, wasn't I? Oh, Liam groaned. Mon Dieu, I hope he doesn't hate me now. Oh, he hates you. Probably plotting your death and ways to hide your body by now. Theo smirked. Anyway. He stepped closer to Liam and then gently took his hand. About our kiss. It was nothing. Liam squeaked, ignoring the tremble in his hands at Theo's touch. I just got carried away. My lips, that is, got carried away. God, what was he saying? I can see that, Theo replied, smiling. Do you think they would like to have dinner with me sometime? I mean, you can come too, but I'd much prefer just your lips. The blood rushed to his face so fast he thought he'd pass out. Liam licked his dry lips, his mind short-circuiting. On a date? Theo hummed, pressing his lips to Liam's knuckles. Oui, mon cher. A date. Just you and me and those lips. Please, stop saying lips, Liam said somewhat breathlessly. Theo chuckled, and the deep rumble sent a shiver down Liam's spine. Okay. He pulled away and took a step back. I should... He gestured to the door. Right. I'll see you. Yup. I'll just... Ouch. Theo walked into the wall, knocking his head against it. Liam cupped his mouth to stop his laughter from bursting out. I didn't, see it there. The wall, that is. Theo stammered, his face bright red. Anyway, I'll just, yeah. Theo strolled out of the room before he knocked into anything else, and Liam locked the door behind him, his heart hammering in his chest. He pressed his hand to his hot cheeks, his stomach doing somersaults and backflips. Did that just happen? Yes, that actually just happened. Liam resisted the urge to let out a very manly squeal and sighed against the door. This didn't mean anything, right? Right. He went back to his room, forcing himself to calm down, and not think about how international rockstar Theo Dupont just asked him out on a date.